in 21A3 of the open meeting law to discuss litigation regarding appeal of special permit 93-13 DiPietro, 8 Riverway, North Falmouth, Massachusetts, and to vote to reconvene back into open meeting. So I'll entertain a motion to do so, and we'll do a roll call
I'll make a
vote.
motion, we enter into an executive session for Appeal 9313, DePietro and Riverway.
Okay, that was made by Jerry. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote in. Jerry, do you want to start us off?
Aye, Jerry Patamas.
Terrence Hurry, aye.
Aye, Ed Van Kuren.
Paul Murphy, aye.
Robert Dugan, aye.
Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to the November 1st meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. We'll be calling this meeting to order. First, I'll ask everyone to please silence their cell phones, and I'll introduce the board at this time. At the far right, your far left, is Jerry Patamas, who is an associate member of the board, followed by Ken Foreman, who is the vice chairman of the board. My name is Terrence Hurry. I am the chairman of the board. To my left is Kimberly Beelen. She is the clerk of the board, followed by Ed Van Kuren, who is a full voting member of the board, Paul Murphy, who is also a full voting member of the board, and Bob Dugan, who is an associate member. With us tonight is also Sari Boudreau, who is the zoning administrator, and Joe Robbins, who is our recording secretary. The Zoning Board of Appeals is charged with applying the zoning bylaws for the town of Falmouth and considers requests for special permits, variances, and appeals as provided by the town bylaws, which have been approved by town meeting, and the Attorney General's Office for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. All decisions are made through the public hearing process. The board's goal is to hear testimony from the applicant and the public, and also to allow a full and fair discussion of the project prior to rendering a decision. To begin each hearing, the clerk will read the public announcement of the hearing and present any pertinent information from the file, such as referrals from town departments and summarizing correspondences to the board. The applicant or the applicant's representative will then have 15 minutes to make a presentation, and time may be extended by vote of the board if we deem necessary. The board will then ask questions to the applicant, and then the public will be invited to comment. Public comment should be directed only at the project itself, and I also ask that you please refrain from making any personal or derogatory statements. These comments can include an opinion in favor or in opposition, or it just might simply be a question about the nature of the project. The chair will limit discussion in the interest of time if comments become repetitive. All members of the public wishing to speak should wait to be recognized by the chair and should come to the podium, and please state your name and address for the record. And we typically limit public comment 2 minutes per person. When the board is satisfied that enough information has been presented by testimony and in the file to make a decision, by motion and vote of the board, the hearing will be closed. Alternatively, we may continue the hearing to a future date and time certain if we need more information. After the hearing is closed, no more testimony may be taken. The board may then further discuss the project among ourselves and make a motion to either deny or approve the project. The motion will include a summary of key findings and conditions. An affirmative vote of 4 members, which is a supermajority, is required for approvals of motions on special permits, variances, and appeals. A split vote, such as 3-2, is a failure to carry and would result in denial of the project. Under Massachusetts general law, if a special permit is denied, the applicant cannot return to the board for 2 years unless the project is substantially different than was previously given to the board. On tonight's agenda, we did have an open meeting item regarding executive session that was taken care of at 6 o'clock. We also have 3 continuations, 4 new hearings, and additional items on our open meeting agenda. So we will start with the continuation application 66-18, Rogers, 689 Gifford Street.
I think you'll find the only new information submitted to the file is an affirmative draft decision from the planning board under site plan review. They did approve it with conditions, and Mr. Rogers is here if you have any questions.
And just for the record, since Kim was not sitting on this application, Ed is the clerk for the purposes of this application.
Good evening.
Mr. Rogers?
Thank you for your time tonight. The project that we're proposing is an additional building located at 689 Gifford Street. It's at the rear of the property, and it's actually the southeast corner. It's just more storage. We have a budget truck rental business that we operate out of there. We're going to give up the truck rental business, and where the parking, which was approved by the board for the budget truck rental business, We're going to remove that and put a building in its place and give up the truck rental business. It's, you know, the obvious win-win for the town in regards to traffic, leaky trucks, tax base, so forth, so on, reduced traffic, so forth. So there really aren't any changes in regard to what we're talking about that have changed since the last meeting, other than the restrictions that the planning board put on it, and the fire department and so forth, which I have acknowledged and agreed to. And I guess that the decision or the proposal by the planning board was that there will be no occupancy permit and so forth issued unless those issues are addressed. Is that correct?
Correct. And Mr. Rogers has worked with the town engineering department to clear up their concerns on the site and through the previous special permit, and those comments are added to the file as well. So he is good to go for a vote from this board.
Any questions from the board?
Yeah, any questions at all?
No questions.
Seeing none, if we're satisfied.
Do we have to close the hearing, or was that closed before?
You have to close the hearing.
I'm happy to make the motion to close,
I'll second.
since you raised the issue.
No, I didn't want to go to the public.
Who was the second on that?
Ken moved to close and second by Jerry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And how would the board like to proceed?
Anyone?
I'm not on it.
I would like to make a very positive motion to approve,
Second.
but don't ask me to list all the reasons why.
Motion was made by Jerry and second by Ed. Moving on to findings and conditions.
It's met site plan.
Would you like me to do it for the board?
Yes, thank you.
Great.
And all the requirements for the fire department and the engineering department.
He meets section 240-72-3C8 of the Code of Falmouth. Under 243C, it's not any more detrimental than what currently exists. This was allowed through a use variance years ago, so keep that in mind. And it's, he is getting rid of the budget rental truck,
Right.
which is going to be an improvement to the site, so those trucks won't be parked out front. He has acknowledged that there will be a Knox box put on the building for the recommendations of the fire department, and as I explained previously, the building has to be sprinkled, and they did mention that, but that is building code. The site is adequate in terms because he's not increasing the impervious area. The building is in the rear corner and will not be visible. There's no impact on traffic. As a matter of fact, it'll probably lessen due to the elimination of the budget rental truck. The Board of Health has no comments on it, so the sewer system, or the septic system is appropriate for the use. Site plan review decision is in the file. It was an affirmative decision with conditions made. How's that for findings?
Is it worth mentioning the loading dock in the rear was being adjusted, or?
Yes,
That's per planning board, right?
Right.
it was
Or-
for the fire department, and
Oh,
he's
okay.
amenable to that. It was actually Jerry's suggestion to remove it.
He had a concern regarding their bigger trucks getting around the corner in the back. It's been there, it's not something that gets used much in this day and age, so all these new moving trucks and so forth, they have lifts that drop down, they got ramps there, so it's really not an issue to take it out for me.
Are you ready for the conditions?
Sure, conditions?
For plans,
Mm-hmm.
the elimination of the budget rental truck operation. There shall be no more than 12 vehicles allowed under the Hertz rental, which was approved in special permit 80-10, I believe it was. There'll be no derogations from any of the conditions previously set forth. except as stated herein in this decision. How's that?
Anything else, Jerry?
I can't hear anything else.
So, no.
Really, you can't hear me? That's a first.
I always like to explicitly adopt the conditions of the planning board in the site plan review.
We do once in a while. Do you want that added?
Yes, I
I
would.
think that's appropriate.
Okay. So adopt site plan review conditions?
Right.
Okay.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, motion was made by Jerry and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's it, Jerry.
Thank you very much. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you.
I'll get that decision to you.
Yes, thank you. I'll be back in a while.
Jerry's excusing himself so he can go to a meeting. He'll be back for the continuations.
All right, so Jerry's out of the meeting for right now, and I guess we'll entertain a motion to take application 75-18 out of order,
I'll make that motion.
Second it.
made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm sorry, excuse me, what did you just do?
75-18 out of order?
Is it 76?
Or
Now,
76.
what you're going to do is make a vote, make a motion to take 66-18 and 76-18 out of order to
We already
continue
did
after the
66.
public hearings.
We already did 66.
Excuse me,
61.
61-18 and 76-18.
Okay, well,
Okay, so
I
that's
will, I'll move that we take 6118, 7618 after the new public hearings.
Go. All right, motion was made by Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
How about 7618?
Yeah, I included.
Right.
So now that brings us to application 75-18, George, 108 Gansett Road in Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Michael G. and Cynthia C. George of Milton, Massachusetts applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-3 and 240-23I of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct the two pre-existing non-conforming dwellings and allow an accessory apartment within new guest quarters structure on subject property known as 108 Gansett Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts. And we received correspondence from the applicant's attorney stating or requesting a continuation from November 1st, 2018 to December 20th, 2018.
All right, so would you like a motion for that, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
So I'll move that we continue 75-18 to December 20 here in Falmouth Town Hall at 6:30.
Second it.
Okay, motion was made by Ken and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving along to application 83-18, Morrissey, 53 Grove Street in North Falmouth.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Nicole D. and Patrick J. Morrissey of Southborough, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Sections 240-3C and 240-69E of the Code of Falmouth to raise and reconstruct the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling and construct a detached garage on subject property known as 53 Grove Street, North Falmouth, Massachusetts. For referrals, Concom had no comment. Assessors notes that it includes lots 7 and 8. There is a engineering review to the file. Just addressing some different issues. I can, I guess, highlight them. Mostly just noting that comments have been addressed, certain comments that they had. It's a 2-page document. Engineering, that would be what was just submitted. Fire department had no comment. Water, 3/4 inch copper service line needs to be upgraded to 1 inch service to property line. Planning had no comment, and then we received 1 letter of support and 1 letter of opposition.
For the applicant?
I don't know if everybody,
You introduce yourself, you talk to the board.
okay, great. Nicole Morrissey,
Patrick
Morrissey, 53 Grove Street, and thank you for making time for us today. We're here to request the review of the setback and to request additional square footage for a raise and reconstruct of this is our current home. We live in New Silver Beach. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area. We purchased the house 3 years ago. We've been there for 3 summers and are looking to increase the size of our 2-bedroom home, as we have 2 teenagers and they're a boy and a girl, and 2 bedrooms isn't exactly working out for us. So as for the setback, the homes on our street, I kind of included right here, a little far away. You can see that the homes are anywhere from 10 to 14 feet setback. Some are 14 feet setbacks with stairs and awnings and entryways that kind of butt into that closer to the 10-foot range. And in keeping with the neighborhood, we were hoping to line up, stay in line with the houses on our side of the street. And one of the main, we've been working on this for almost 2 years. One of our main goals was to make our house look like it had been there forever, so it didn't stand out in this quaint neighborhood that we have been in for over 15 years. And I took some pictures. I put those on the other side of the homes, looking at it from both the right and the left sides of the street, so you could see how the houses kind of line up. That's on the far side in the darker blue matting. As for the square footage, we're requesting over the 20% an additional 396 extra square feet. So 20% apparently is what is deemed allowed, and then we were told 25 was a reasonable request. We're asking for another 3.96. And we've been measuring this house over and over, and by 6 inches here, 11 inches there, to get it to exactly where it needs to be and make it efficient. So we were hoping to accommodate a livable home and a 2-car garage. And that is,
I would just add that
Yeah.
It's in the new Silver Beach Sewer District, so we're required to have 3 bedrooms, which we've
A
worked through.
maximum, yeah.
A maximum of 3 bedrooms. So we've done that, and we worked really hard, as Nikki said, to maintain sort of the integrity of the architecture of the neighborhood. We felt that a single structure with a detached garage would be the most appropriate setting for the neighborhood to fit in.
There is, just for the board's information, there is an email from the Board of Health in there stating that the bonus room above cannot be a bedroom because of the 3-bedroom limit, but they're saying it's a rec room. So if you approve it, a condition would be no bedroom or sleeping accommodations
Correct.
above the garage.
Thank you, Suri. I guess we'll turn it to board questions if you're all set.
Sure.
all set.
Paul, sorry, Bob, do you want to start us off?
So what is the current setback from the main road?
14.2.
And that's the current?
Well, the current home,
The current home, yeah.
Oh. 14.2.
It's going to 14.8.
So we
So we're
figured
going
we'd
back
scoot it
6
back
inches.
an extra 6 inches just to be good neighbors, and then,
In the
that's to the porch, and then the home itself is another almost 10 feet back from that.
And the garage is just storage only? You can have any heat or anything out there in the garage?
No.
No.
Cars and,
2-car garage and just a single room above it. And it's a dormered second floor, so it's not a full second floor. So even if there wasn't a garage above it, it would just, it would be, ask the architect and the builder, it's an additional 3 feet beyond what a traditional just garage would be without that room above, since we did the dormers.
That's all I have.
Paul, any questions?
No.
Ed?
No, none.
Kim?
Yeah, so I just had a couple more questions. So I know that you said you wanted to leave it kind of still, the house still close to the road, so that's in line. Is that kind of the only reason that you're keeping it, or you're trying to preserve some of the?
Well, so the
Backyard too.
the yard in
too.
front is a steep slope, and it would be unusable, so it gives us more of a backyard for the
You can see it's
kids
a stone
and
wall.
the dogs.
This is like 6 feet off the ground
Yeah.
in front of the house.
It's not a huge space, so the 10 feet makes a big difference in the
Okay.
back, no doubt.
Maybe that was it.
Thank you.
Ken, any questions?
So you have one first floor bedroom and 2 upstairs, is that
Right.
correct?
Mhm.
And then,
Yeah, there's no plumbing, there's no heat, there's no nothing in the garage.
okay, and then you have these 2 sort of significant open areas in the upstairs.
Anything else, Ken?
The height of that structure?
21 and a,
31.8 for
for
the
the main
house,
structure
house
or
or
the
the
garage,
garage?
yeah.
Main
or
height.
31.11, I think.
Thank you, yeah.
31.8 and then 21.11 for the garage.
For the garage, okay.
Mhm.
And regarding the bonus room and the comments that Sari had, you'd be amenable to conditions?
Of course.
Yes.
Okay.
I do have some, sorry.
Follow-up?
Yeah,
Sure.
sorry. I see that you have a bulkhead. Is the basement unfinished?
Unfinished, yeah.
Any other board questions?
Yeah, are you gonna have heat in the bonus room above the garage? I know you said
Said
there's
no.
not gonna be any heat in the bonus
No.
room.
Nope.
All right. Any members, I'm sorry, Ken?
So there is access from inside to the basement, I see. Is that also correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Stairwell going
For
down.
storage or whatever.
And is that where all the heating and cooling?
Yes, all the systems are,
Correct.
yes, in the basement.
All right. That's for the moment.
Any members of the public wish to make any comments, questions, concerns regarding this project?
Have a seat.
Yes, sir, if you don't mind coming up to the podium and stating your name and address for the record. And just anything you have to say, just address it through the board, and we'll get the answer from the applicant.
My name is George Henry Birch, B-E-R-T-S-C-H III. Most people know me by Hank. And I live at 12 Cove Road, diagonally behind Nikki and Pat's house. I have told them I fully support their project with one exception, and it's the garage. It's proposed to be two stories, 21 feet, 11 inches high, 24 feet on a side. I wrote a letter to the board, it should be in the folder.
It is.
And I said, if you can imagine Pythagorean theorem, what I'm looking at from my deck is 31 feet wide, 22 feet high, almost 700 square feet of wall. I have enjoyed an incredible view for years that I'm perfectly willing to give up to the house. But I cannot imagine coming out of my deck and looking at this garage. In my letter to the board, I said that I could find only one detached two-car garage in the new Silver Beach area, which I defined as Wild Harbor Road, as far as Cove Road before you go in Nye Neck, west on Quaker or down Quaker and coming in on Silver Beach Avenue. One detached one floor. That's on Glen Avenue, and it backs up to a forested area, so it doesn't block anybody's view. In my letter, in my letter to the board, I made a mistake. I have since located two more, 29 and 31 West Avenue that sits right on Wild Harbor. There's two-car garage behind each of those, but because of the slope of Grove Street and behind it Ocean View Avenue, people can look over those two garages to the water with an unobstructed view from their first floor. I am resigned to losing the entire view of the water, but I won't even be able to see their house if this garage is approved. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns from members of the public? Mr. Morris, Mr. and Mrs. Morrissey, if you'd like to maybe address that?
Sure. Hank has been a wonderful neighbor, and we really have loved living where we do. We have wonderful neighbors. And obviously blocking his view is not, something that was not our intention at all. And we have worked through putting the garage under. That was our initial thought, and the architect said it would raise the house up so high that we'd have to come 6 feet down off to get to the to the backyard, and that it would look completely out of place with the homes in the area. The neighbors weren't thrilled about that idea, and I've been talking to everybody over the last year and a half and showing them the plans and asking them what they thought, and it's very important to me that that I'm on good terms with my neighbors.
Second thing is, sorry.
Nope. We also looked at putting it, if you're looking at the home here, attaching it here and pulling it around that way, so that when you pull in like this, not only can you not make the turn without a 3 to 5 point turn, my architect said that nobody would buy the home. My architect, by the way, doesn't adore me because we've gone through so many different scenarios in order to get a garage, because we do plan on living here when we retire, and that's why we have a first floor bedroom, and that's why we want to have both of our cars in the garage. So underneath, aside of, and over here, unfortunately, if we were to pull it really far forward, the grade is too steep for that as well. Again, ideally, we get all of our cars, currently they're all parked here. I don't know if anybody's ever driven down Grove Street. The cars are parked on the street. This would get my car, my husband's car, his mom's car, my sister's car, everybody that comes to visit us off the street. A little more open, which would be nice for the cars and people do access this road to get to Wild Harbor Yacht Club for sailing. So this is kind of a tight squeeze, and I thought this was, a really nice solution to that problem. When we did discuss the garage and thought maybe of doing the space upstairs, if we do move there, we'll have a place for our stuff. I was told, obviously, you can put some space up there, but it's floor and a half, and if we did want to drop the pitch, especially after seeing Hank's letter, it would go down 2 feet. So any garage is going to be either the height that it is or 2 feet lower.
Correct. Here's a picture of our
according to our
neighbors
builders.
across the street of their two-car garages, very similar style to this one that we're proposing.
Is that submitted?
Sure. Is that submitted to the file?
I don't know.
We just took that
Took it a
today.
little while.
No.
You want us to?
I don't
Yeah.
Yeah, we
remember
put
it.
it in the file.
Too.
Just the neighbors.
Yeah.
This is Hank's house right here. This is his deck. It's not a great shot.
Right here.
Okay, yeah, those are ours that are directed in. Some of them right here, this is Hank's house right way of where his deck is, and he wouldn't have the same view that he had before. And we were hoping to kind of salvage his side view, because I've done this over and over, that he could see through the deck. And again, we've stood there, I've looked.
So I think we're good. I think the
Yeah.
request is to do the setback 6 inches beyond where it is, and to get the additional 396 square feet so that we can build a two-car garage and look forward to living down here.
So just for clarification, if you shifted that garage behind the house to the left, you wouldn't have enough turn radius to get into it?
Correct.
If you turned in this way, we're short by like 7 feet. I don't know.
No way.
So that little jut in space, is that just a
That's a
backup
turnaround
area,
that
just a
the
turn area?
Architect,
3 points.
right, so they're not backing.
There are pictures in the file of homes in the area that were done for the bulk calculations. They do show garages.
Right, there's garages right across the
With
way.
the exception of
next
the
door.
issue with Hank, which is clearly an issue, we feel that looking at the property, it'll look less house, right? Because if we did a traditional, just straight across house with attached garage.
would take
going
up the
this way,
whole
you
front.
consume the whole lot.
Right.
And we see a lot of new houses coming up like that don't look, they look new, and that's not our intent.
Also, these people have a double lot, when most of them are single lots in the area.
And we are amenable as well to planting nice things and doing as much as we can to make it less unpleasant, obviously, for our neighbor, if that helps.
Any other additional questions from the board?
Can I return to one last comment that I completely forgot?
We typically just allow one time up.
Could you make an exception? I think we're trying to work
Very,
together.
very briefly, if I'll allow it.
Wait till you get to the podium so the TV can pick you up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On Cove Road, right behind Grove Street, every house that has been built in the last 40 years, including the one under construction right now, is a two-car, and I call it enclosed, part of the house, as well as one at 25 Grove Street, the other side of Ocean View, down near the swamp. The existing house has a one-car garage underneath. My point in my letter was, if you can do it with one car garage, make it wider, move it over into the center of the lot, get two cars under there, the garage goes away.
Can I ask one question of
Ken.
Mr. Birch?
Not go back.
Does it help you at all if the structure is a little bit lower?
No,
Does 2 feet make a difference? Okay.
it's 30 feet wide. Again, Pythagorean, 31 feet. It's the angle, it's on the plan, it's 10.5 feet inside the lot line, side and back. It's just the position of where it is, the garage versus my house. And as long as it's a separate building, and it's 524 by 24, 576 square feet, it's what puts them over the 20% guideline in the first place. If it's underneath the house, as it is now, the garage goes away. Actually, they would then have more square footage in the house and the porch.
Thank you, Mr.
And I
Birch.
helped cut down the shrub.
Kim, did you have a question?
No,
Address
The
just one
garage.
last comment.
we did try to put it originally when we were designing it underneath. The garage that's there now, you can't actually fit a car in. My brother-in-law's car is a fit, and it couldn't get into the garage. It's a storage space. I wish it would fit, because that would be great. So we did try to do that, and if we were to raise the house up the 6 or whatever feet that the architect was telling us to, plus add another 30 feet, the house that he's talking about on 25 Grove, we drove by that today, probably should have taken a picture, is next door to two, maybe 800 square foot homes, and it is towering above it by what seems like 50 feet. My goal is to not do that to my neighbors, and to obviously not make Hank upset, but to not put my house so that it's towering above, so you say, you know, new silver, new silver, new silver. This person doesn't belong here, new silver.
I have one other question. Did you do any comparative analysis of lot coverage? Often when we see these,
It's in the file.
Suri and I
It is?
did, yeah, sat and did
Okay.
some of that.
So are the pictures of the houses along the street, so you can
Yes.
see that where the garages are. I believe 25 Grove is in there as well.
I apologize for having not looked at that.
Not at all.
I'll look at it. Thank you.
And while Ken's looking that over, any
Yeah,
other
yeah, I'm
questions
done.
from the board?
Mm-mm.
Thank you.
Thank you. How would the board like to proceed?
Well, it may make sense to have some discussion, since we heard some opposition.
I think it's appropriate. Start us off, Ken?
Why not? So, I think that's a nice project. A lot of the lot coverage is actually, I think, in the wraparound porch, but I think that kind of gives it some scale. So I think that's nice. I think that they've been very thoughtful about their proposal. I certainly understand the neighbor's concern, and I just have a couple of points that I want to say about that. I know in our considerations, you know, impact upon views and vistas, that's one of the things that we take into consideration, but also, I mean, they have a 10,000 square foot lot, which is fairly large for the neighborhood. You know, the detached garage, I think it's going to be a nice feature for the home. I think it's kind of nicely done, how it's proposed. I know my parents are probably watching at home, but they bought one house in from the water, and so when the neighbors put on an addition, they lost part of their view. And so I'm not unsympathetic. I certainly understand where the neighbor's coming from, but I think that's just the nature. Some homes are in the way of water views. It's just the nature of the town. So I think that's unfortunate, but I still am in favor of the project. And I would just say, this is the proposal that the applicants have come in with. I'm certainly not going to sit here and try and redesign or force you to redesign the project, though I guess sometimes in the past I've demanded that of people.
Just on height, Ken.
But, I think that this is an approvable project.
I will say, under 240-69E, which is what they've applied under, it's a view and vista from a public way.
Okay, thank you, sorry.
Anyone else?
Well, the only question in my mind is whether, you know, if they went, this is the position Kim might have taken in other projects, is to go to a one-car garage, but-
I had that thought.
which would probably get them much closer to the 20%. But there certainly are homes in the neighborhood that have the lot coverage, although some of them might be on smaller lots.
If they scale that down to a one-car garage, that upper half floor is virtually unusable.
Well,
And again, it's a
I'm not-
family.
Right, but they do have a full basement apparently for storage, so. I'm just saying that on occasion in the past, the board has been sticky about these going over 20%. And this is certainly a well-done
Special
project, so.
permit.
I don't have a strong view, but I do always respect the point of view of the neighbors.
Okay, Thank you, Ken. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think they put a lot of effort into making the neighbors happy. And I think that's enough for me.
Yeah, I think that's a good point to bring up. They did prove that they had tried other ways to accomplish the one abutter.
Anyone else?
No, I have nothing good to add.
How would the board like to proceed?
What, are you in favor of it, Paul and
Yeah,
Bob?
yeah,
Are you
I
guys
mean,
both-
there's other, I mean, they could not build the garage, come back some other time,
It fits
But, you
within
know,
the area.
whatever, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about it, but,
There's 6 lots in the area that have more coverage.
I'm going to vote to approve it, but, if there was a lot of opposition, they could have just said, all right, we won't build a garage right now, whatever, but, yeah, it's just a thought, I don't know. So, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Well, the hearing's still open. So can I just ask a question?
Of course you can.
Chairman? So, did you give consideration to a one-car garage? I'm just asking if you could just go to the podium, please. And I guess why two-car garage? That will address Ken's.
We did give consideration to the one-car garage. We do want to live down here at some point, and we have 2 cars, plus our kids have cars.
Also, the scale and look of it, which was really important.
They did
fitting
design
into
one
the
for us,
neighborhood,
and it
they
was
showed us on the
weird.
CAM, or whatever, CAD, whatever
Yeah.
you call it, and it looked dumb.
If
personally,
we
versus the
were
scale of the
gonna
house.
wait to do the garage, which we even considered doing, we'd still need a garage. So if we're
And
gonna,
views are still gonna be blocked, whether
it's
it's
either way.
24 by 24 or
And if we move
16
it up
by
or move it
24.
back, it's still unfortunately not ideal. And I'm hoping that he still has, the peak view on the side that we stood and tried to figure out when we were laying everything out.
Thank you.
I think we have everything that we need. Would someone like to make the motion to close the hearing?
I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second it.
Okay, motion was made by Paul and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And how would the board like to proceed?
Ken, are you comfortable?
Well, I'm assuming that even if I'm not, that there's 4 people that are.
4-1.
I have mixed feelings.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. It's a sacrifice to ask the owners to reduce their garage, but obviously it's something that's affecting one of their abutters. On the other hand, if that abutter had moved there and the garage was there, they would never have known the
It's true.
difference, right?
Yeah.
So,
And views and vistas apply from. the
there's no
streetscape,
question
not from
that
the
is,
neighbor.
the bylaw does not state. But what we are doing is we're granting something above the 20%.
That's true.
So that gives us, I think, some discretion in terms of, the impacts.
Well, you know what I think
one
about,
abutted.
so there was a project, I think, it was in the Heights, and there was somebody a garage with, floor above, exterior stairway, it was going to be usable space. And so I think the fact that this is, it's 1.5 story storage, it's not as if it's going to be used on a day, the exterior, do you remember that project? It was stairs, and it had a big impact
Boy, do I remember that.
on the neighboring property owner, so, I don't,
And what did we do?
And it's when
I don't recall.
you approved it.
Yeah,
Oh, I wasn't
They
here. I
changed
didn't
the
have to
stairway
vote.
to the side.
Yeah, that's right.
The lot coverage was over. It was 2 or 3 abutters. This is one abutter. And remember, the lot coverage back in 2002 was 35%. And when they changed the bylaw in 2002 by town meeting vote, they allowed the caveat of going up to 25% for primarily undersized lots like this, so that people could have the normal use of a lot.
I just think we see so many projects that are on really tight lots that are very tight, like really tight, and this is kind of spaced out. To me, it just seems like the lot can accommodate it. So with that said, whether I get Ken's vote or not, I will move to approve application 8318.
Okay,
Second.
motion was made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'm sorry.
Oh, we need findings
We
and
need findings and
conditions.
conditions, strike that.
Just
Motion
wait.
was made by Kim and second by Ed.
Okay.
Moving on to findings and conditions.
So, there's a non-conforming setback, and it's modestly, very modestly improving from 14.3 to 14.8 feet. Finding it's gonna be a two-bedroom going to three-bedroom home. It's on the new Silver Beach Sewer District. They can have no more than 3 bedrooms. That they're putting a detached two-car garage. Testimony was that storage only, no heat, and no bedroom use in the room
It is a
above the
bonus room,
storage area.
a rec
Bonus
room, no heat.
Right. Finding, there's an unfinished basement. This will enable the homeowners to remove the cars from the front of the property from the street area. Testimony that they were amenable to put additional plantings to the rear of the garage. Work with their neighbor, to address some of his concerns.
Yeah.
They put an awful lot of effort into the whole project.
Yeah, I think increased utilization for the property owners. Do you want a finding about that's in keeping with the neighborhood, with the
Yeah,
lot
I think
coverage,
so.
that there's other houses?
Sure,
Yeah.
we'll toss that in.
So is
Yeah.
it 240, what are the other ones, Suri, 240, 216?
216.
And you, under 243C, is it not more detrimental?
I will say it's not more detrimental.
Okay.
Conditions per plans, no bedroom above the garage,
I think
no
we
more than 3 bedrooms.
I think we should consider a deed restriction on the 3 bedrooms because it's on the sewer system.
It's already governed by the sewer system as long as you condition no bedrooms or sleeping accommodations above the garage. Remember, it doesn't have any heat. The whole of Silver Beach is limited to 3 bedrooms.
So do we want to say no habitable space above the garage?
I had,
No. No, you just no bedrooms or sleeping accommodations. They've stated that it's going to be a bonus room, a rec room. They don't have heat in it, so right there, it couldn't be a bedroom.
They'll throw that in.
And the finding is that there's no heat.
we made a finding to the unfinished basement. And we've limited the number of bedrooms on the property.
Yeah.
I think that's
So
all.
the condition would be 3 bedrooms only.
Yep.
I don't think you need to deed restrict
No.
it. But it's up to
Well,
the
they have to
board.
apply the special, they have to record the special permit anyways.
Hmm.
So it'll be in the chain of title.
All right, so I think that does it for findings and conditions. Motion was made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I'll vote aye.
Okay, unanimous.
It's a nice spot.
Was it 5-0? I didn't hear. Thank you. Thank you, Morrissey's.
Enjoy your new
Thank
home.
you.
You're back. And let the record reflect that Jerry is back.
Whoa. What did you say, sir?
I said, whoa.
And up next, we have application 84-18, Knight, 77 Priscilla Street, and T-Ticket.
Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 40A of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Sandra L. Knight of T-Ticket, Massachusetts, applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-3C and 240-69E of the Code of Falmouth to remove the existing deck and screen porch and in its place construct an addition to the pre-existing non-conforming single-family dwelling on subject property known as 77 Priscilla Street, T-Ticket, Massachusetts. For referrals. Engineering had its standard comment. They also recommend adding dry wells, rain garden, or other stormwater measure for the roof, which seems to be becoming part of their standard comment. Concom has no comment. Assessors includes lots 14 and 15. Health, allowed up to 4 bedrooms in this LPSSL Lil Pond Sewer District. Currently, 2 bedrooms with the 3rd bedroom proposed. Fire department had no comment. Water had, says not applicable. Planning had no comment, and there was correspondence from the applicant, knowing that there is a basement and it is unfinished, storage and mechanical room.
Good evening. I'm Al Hahn, the owner of Joel Construction. I'm here representing Sandra Knight. We're proposed to take down an existing structure that is 8 feet by 22 feet. We'd like to increase it by 2 additional feet, keeping within the same floor plan, and creating a master suite for additional living space, I believe the daughter's gonna be moving in for some assisted living, and also allow for a little bit more privacy, some separation between the 2-bedroom and the 3-bedroom. That's pretty much a little bit less conforming to the last plans we had there.
And it is a 1-story structure, remaining a 1-story structure.
Anything else?
That's about it.
All right, we'll turn it to board questions. Bob, do you want to get us started?
No questions.
No questions.
None, pretty straightforward.
Kim?
Come back to me, I'll find one.
All right. Ken, any questions?
Just curious as to the total bedroom count, is that changing?
It would be increasing by 1. It's a 2
going to
2-bedroom now,
3.
and would be making into a 3rd.
Jerry, any questions?
No questions.
Can you address the engineering comment regarding installing dry wells or other measures like that?
That's not an issue. I just had a question on to what extent are they looking for the dry wells? Are they talking just solid pipe going into pits with stone? Is it all 4 of the downspouts, or just the 2 off the new living space?
Are there downspouts and gutters at this point?
There is, yeah.
And you're going to put those on the addition as well?
We would, yes.
There you go.
So this is the answer,
He has gutters and downspouts.
right, but they're not going to a dry well. So the
They-
question is, I think his question was, does engineering want all 4?
Oh, at the addition is what they're speaking of.
Just the addition?
Yes, I'm sorry.
So we're absolutely willing to do that.
And there's no runoff problems at the,
Not at all
Currently.
at this time. Like I said, the structure's already there. We're just gonna be bringing it back up to code and increasing the roof capacity slightly.
Jim, do you have any questions?
No, not really.
Sari, do you have anything?
This is the easiest one so far.
Turning
Now, remember that there is a capacity up to 4 bedrooms. They're only making this from a 2 to a 3.
from 2 to 3, but
Right.
4 is the limit with the sewer system. Okay, any
I
members?
guess I do have an additional question.
Go right
So
ahead.
this is going to be accessible from the exterior?
Yes,
Okay. And is there an interior access point too?
there would be, yes.
There will be, okay.
There'll
Is
be
there,
a shared kitchen.
so no separate cooking area?
No, there'll be no cooking whatsoever.
Oh,
Okay.
pretty tiny.
All right,
This house is about the size of the garage.
see there's a bulkhead on the plan. What's the status of the basement? Is it finished, unfinished?
No, it's a block foundation, it's unfinished.
Okay. Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Seeing none, back to the board. Do we have enough to close the hearing?
I'll move that we close application 8418.
Second.
Motion made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
And what would be the board's pleasure?
I'll move that we approve application 8418.
Second it.
Move to approve made by Kim and second by Ed. Moving on to findings and conditions.
I guess I'll do them. So there's just a, modest increase in lot coverage. It's remaining, it's not increasing in height, it's a one-story remaining a one-story. Largely just replacing the screen porch that exists now. Increased utilization for the homeowner. Are you writing these down? No, it doesn't matter. Three.
She has it already written.
I think she does have it already written. Is it? Oh. So 3 bedrooms. It is on the sewer service.
I think it's worth noting, there is a modest, well, let's see, the side yard setback is still acceptable, right? So that's not a nonconformity. So there is no increase in nonconformity. Well, except for the lot coverage, right?
But that's permissible.
Yes.
Right.
Okay, never mind.
No separate cooking facility. I don't know if anybody cares.
Ooh, I didn't get that one.
Since it does have a separate entrance. And finding that the applicant is amenable to
Dry well,
dry wells.
add addition.
One story remaining, one story, I think
Yes.
is significant.
And conditions per plan?
Not more detrimental under 243C, please.
Yes, not more detrimental, and then the 24216 findings as well. Conditions would be per plans.
No more than 3 bedrooms without approval by this board.
Okay. No separate cooking facility.
All right, I think that might do it for findings and conditions. Anything else?
That's it anyway.
All right, seeing none, that motion was made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Right.
Congratulations.
Kim's in a generous mood tonight. She didn't
Not for
ask,
long. No.
didn't ask them to take out the shed.
I was waiting for that.
I did have the thought about this. They didn't have a garage.
True. So now we have Elvis's place.
And up next, we have application 85-18, Gracelands by the Sea LLC, 39 Jupiter Point Road in Woods Hole.
Is this likely to go more than one hearing? I think this is likely to go more than one hearing. I guess it doesn't matter, because other people are still here anyways.
Are you using the overhead? Do I have to kill the lights?
There's no laptop here.
Oh.
I didn't do it.
What do you
Wow, I wonder what happened. And there's no, I'm sorry, Laura, I did not know that there wasn't one there.
Have to do it the old-fashioned way.
Which means Michael's gonna talk more, huh?
Oh,
Oh,
Well,
let's see if we can find something.
Sorry.
Is that laptop networked right there?
Pardon me?
Is her laptop network?
No, this is mine. Sorry. I apologize, I don't know what happened.
Can you put a flash drive in an iPad?
Uh,
I think you can.
there is a USB port in here, but the remote's, so, can we turn this on at least? or-
Does the
It's on.
TV have its own USB?
It's on, try putting, you can see the blue light in the front. Try putting your thing in a USB port and see what happens. It is on, I can see the light. They never shut it off,
It's on.
is what I'm told.
Yeah, the light's on.
There's a USB port in that.
Want to take a 5-minute break?
Sorry, can we take a few-minute break while they try to
Sure.
figure it out?
Sure.
All right, we'll take a 5-minute break due to technical difficulties. are back with application 84-18 Nights, I'm sorry, application 85-18 Gracelands by the CLLC, 39 Juniper Point Road in Woods Hole.
Okay. Being all persons deemed affected by the Board of Appeals under Section 11 of Chapter 48 of the Massachusetts General Laws, you are hereby notified that Gracelands by the Sea LLC of Falmouth, Massachusetts applied to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a special permit pursuant to Section 240-23B of the Code of Falmouth to convert the existing dwelling into 2 dwelling units on subject property known as 39 Juniper Point Road, Woods Hole, Massachusetts. For referrals, engineering had its standard comment and the recommendation to add dry wells or rain garden. Fire department had no comment. Concom had no comment. Assessors had no comment. Planning had no comment. Health septic system has a failed Title 5 inspection. Recent perk tests done. No plan septic proposed with this application, and then notes that there's been a plan submitted October 31st, 2018. Water existing acceptable service, and then there were 3 letters of support submitted.
And there's an email from Scott McGann addressing his original referral.
Yes, so Laura, I looked at the plan you submitted via email, and it appears to meet Title 5 for 8 bedrooms. The plan is not official, lacks stamp and signature of designer, and a permit application has not been submitted. However, I don't see any issues with the design.
Thank you.
Okay, and for the applicant?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Laura Moynihan. I'm a Falmouth attorney representing Gracelands by the Sea LLC, the principals of which are Howard Grosser and Judith McLean, who are here in the front row. And with us is Jill Neubauer and Christian Mize from Neubauer Architects and Mike McGrath from Holmes & McGrath. So I've tried to be really technical savvy here and put everything on the flash drive, so that almost backfired on me, but anyway. So we have a number of slides here to just go through. So this is the location of the property. It's on Juniper Point in Woods Hole. It was originally part of a much larger, the Crane, known as the Crane Estate. And about a year ago, the land was divided up into 3 lots, and this parcel that's highlighted was sold to Howard and Judy. The main house of the estate is located on this parcel. It's 2.02 acres of land. The zoning district is residential B. This house was built around 1885, and it's a very large house. The existing living space is 7,000 square feet. As far as the lot coverage goes, it's well under what is allowed under zoning at 5.7% for structures and 8.5% overall, so under the 20%, 40% allowed limits. So this is an application under what we call the conversion section to convert a dwelling in existence as of January 1st, 1980 into up to 4 dwelling units is allowed. We're proposing 2 dwelling units here. The main unit is Unit 1, where Howard and Judy would make their home, and then Unit 2 would be a smaller unit that they would intend to sell to another party. The setbacks for the structure are, exceed what's allowed under zoning. So here we are. The actual lot frontage is on Hinckley Road. You'll see that on the plan. But the access is off of Juniper Point Road, which is a right-of-way. So we have beachfront. It's a beachfront lot as well. So we have a setback from the beach. So this is the section under the zoning bylaw, 240-23B, allows the conversion, as I said, and a special permit is required. So here we have the bedrooms. There are 10 existing bedrooms. You do have the existing floor plans in your file. I did also mark on them where all of those bedrooms are. The property, according to Howard and Judy, was marketed as a 10-bedroom home. All of the rooms were outfitted with beds and used as bedrooms, so historically it is a 10-bedroom home. The proposed bedrooms for Unit 1 would be 6. With that 6th bedroom, we're including what's called the tower room, which you probably saw on the plans because it's self-contained, so it would meet the Title V definition of a bedroom. And then Unit 2 would have 2 bedrooms. We've met the required parking with 6 spaces proposed, and you see the parking area on the site plan. It's a relatively large gravel parking area off of Juniper Point Road. These are some old photographs. The quality isn't that great because of their age, but just, again, one of the criteria is establishing to you that the house existed as of January 1st, 1980. So this is about 1920 from the Woods Hole Historical Society. This is a photograph from the Book of Falmouth, and you'll see in the top left corner, you'll see the house in question, and this is a photograph of Little Harbor taken about 1895, kind of an interesting photo, and again, the quality's not that great, but you can make out the house on the top left, I think because of the tower that's there. So this was the former Crane home, and here it is again, about 1920. We filed the assessor's records with you, so I think it's pretty clear that this house was around in 1980. Here are some photographs that were used in the marketing of the home when it was being sold, so it's obviously a beautiful structure. This is the access point off of Juniper Point Road, and here are the views. There's a dock area as well, beach area. It's just lovely. Yeah, gorgeous place. More beach. Here's some of the views from one of the upper levels in the house. And this is what's called the tower room. So this is the top, and I've been up there, and I tell you, it's spectacular. It really is. You could stay there all day and just look out that window. It's gorgeous. So here are just some photographs to give you an idea of the age of the structure. This is a little dining area, sitting area inside. You can see the architecture is very interesting. Another sitting area, dining area in the house. The grand stairwell and entrance. Here's one of the bedrooms. Another bedroom. The upstairs stairway area. These are the existing elevation plans. You have these in your file, but very little change at all. One of the criteria under the bylaw is that there not be any mixed material change to the exterior of the dwelling. So you'll see from the proposed elevations that really there are some slight changes in the reconfiguration of decks. Those decks are in very poor condition. They need to be replaced, which I'll get to as part of why this project is happening because of the amount of work that's needed on this building. But you can see from looking at the elevations, comparing the two, that we have pretty much insignificant changes to the exterior of the dwelling that really involve a set of stairs into the Unit 2, a reconfiguration of an outdoor deck, etc. The site plans you have, this is the existing conditions plan, and then we have the proposed site plans, and these are all in your file. So these are the existing floor plans. There actually is a tunnel that comes out of the basement, and so this portion on the left of the plan, it's drawn a little oddly. It's not actually located over there, but I think they just tried to fit it on one sheet, but it is a tunnel coming out. And there also is an elevator in the property that the elevator would be abandoned. Existing first floor, more floor plans. These are all in your file, so just giving you an idea. Here's the roof plan. These are the bedroom counts. So one on the first floor of the existing, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the second floor, 8, 9, and 10 on the third floor, and then the tower, calling a bedroom as well. These are the proposed plans. So this is the layout for Unit 1, and then we have more floor plans, and you've seen all these. They're in your file as well. Unit 1 and 2. And again, Unit 2 will have 2 bedrooms. This upper portion of the house and the tower would remain part of Unit 1, Howard and Judy's residence. Roof plan. So the house is in need of significant upgrades. The estimated cost is about $2.5 million. So electrical and plumbing, new septic system, windows, foundation work, rot repair for the decks, roof and shingles, kitchen, all bathrooms need to be replaced, and plaster. So this is the driving force for this creative idea, I would suggest, of taking a portion of this historic house and allowing for a second unit to be created that would help fund these improvements. So what often happens, I think, as you know, with these historic structures is they're torn down because they're just too expensive to rebuild or to renovate. So in this particular case, they've come up with this plan, create another unit, generate some revenue for the house itself, and be able to make all these improvements that are in excess of a couple of $1 million. So it's going to be a lot of work. So as far as the benefits of the project go, it does allow, obviously, for the preservation of this very historic home. There was a kind of a cute story on the marketing of it, how Woodrow Wilson was going to come and spend his summer here, and they nicknamed it the Summer White House in 1920. But as it turned out, the Secret Service felt Woods Hole was too much of a risk, so he couldn't come. But you know, it has obviously a lot of history and a lot of value to Woods Hole and Falmouth generally. There will be an overall visual improvement for the exterior, and there's some mitigation plantings and landscape improvements proposed. You have in your file letters of support from both immediate abutters who are members of the Crane family, Thomas and Charles, who acquired 26 and 35 Juniper Point, and 9 Little Harbor Road, which is on Juniper Point as well. And that's it. So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions if you have of me or Mr. McGrath or the architects who are here. I should also, I guess, say that, you know, we feel we've met all the criteria of the conversion section. We're not increasing bedrooms. We're not increasing living space. The house existed as of 1980. We have a very large lot. Standards of 240-216, I think, have been clearly met. New septic system, visual improvement to the neighborhood. In keeping with the site, there really aren't any exterior changes that are going to alter all of that. So, thank you.
Jerry, do you want to start us off?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Ken, anything?
Laura, could you just, for my benefit, just explain again, so the unit 2 is a smaller unit, right?
Correct, yep.
That's on the first floor?
First and second.
Okay, so
Okay.
just how does it work? I guess that's what I'm...
So this is the proposed first floor plan. Would you like to address that, Jill? Jill can do it better than me, so.
I am Jill Neubauer from Jill Neubauer Architects. How do I use this thing? And what about to point?
There's no pointer.
Okay, all right. Okay, so on the first floor of the house, there is primary access for both units. The house has the access on the upper left-hand side for Unit 2, so the new unit. One comes up those stairs and gets to a deck that now connects the existing deck on the top with the bow and the existing deck here with the on it. And one comes into that large
I'm
door.
sorry, Jill. Can you
Sorry.
take the microphone
Yeah.
with you, please?
Sorry.
So the TV people can hear you.
Okay. So Unit 2 will come up those stairs and come up to the deck. The primary entrance is off of the bowed deck on top.
Okay.
You come into that entrance hall there, and there's their large great room. And then they have a stairway that goes up to the 2 bedrooms in the next.
And that's an existing stairway in the home?
That is not. To get the stair and the floor plan to work out, we've had to change the existing primary large hall and to build a new stair for the Unit 2.
Okay.
The second stair immediately to its side belongs to Unit 1. It's a historic stair, and we're not touching that. Unit 1 comes up on the far right-hand side, upper right-hand side, up an existing deck into an existing space, and we're taking the historic door that used to exist over here and reusing that as their new front door, and that feeds into Judy and Howard's space on the right-hand side of this. And the demising wall is the large dashed line that zigzags up. And then on the second floor, Unit 2 again comes up their own stairway, and they have 2 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms up there. And then Howard and Judy have the property on the right-hand side with the 3 bedrooms and the master suite. And then the third floor again is just entirely for the primary residence.
So Unit 2 will not have access to the tower?
Correct.
All righty, I get it.
You have anything?
Yeah, so I think, Attorney Moynihan might have addressed this. So is the intention, I think you said that the intention is to sell Unit 1. So you'll submit it to condominium status, is that the game plan, and then sell off Unit 1?
It's Unit 2,
Oh,
yes.
excuse me, yes,
Yeah.
Unit 2. I
Yes.
apologize, yes.
And as has happened historically with applications under this section, that would be the plan, that if the board is inclined to grant the permit, then we would submit condominium documents and create a master deed, and it would be 2 condominium units.
Okay, thank you.
Ed, any questions?
No, I think it's a great project.
Paul?
No questions.
Bob?
Yep, no questions. It's really nice. It's a nice plan.
And, Attorney Moynihan, just to address the bylaw, no home occupation or taking of borders?
That's correct. We would expect that would be a condition.
All right. Suri, do you have any questions?
Any secret tunnels outside of that hallway? Any secret doorways? It's kind of exciting, seeing something that old.
I had the privilege of going through the tunnel. Howard made me, and it was pretty interesting. Really
Frightening?
interesting. Yeah,
Was
a
it
little
frightening?
frightening.
Was it?
Yeah.
The tunnel goes down to the water, is that what it does?
You want to talk to him about it, Howard?
They smuggled rum in.
I was just gonna say,
At one time, that may well have been true. Howard Grosser, I live at 39 Juniper Point Road at the moment. No, that tunnel actually accesses the elevator, or was elevator access. The basement is 2 stories above ground level. So it was, I guess, a challenge for some of the former residents there to make it even to the first floor. So there was an elevator put in.
so it wasn't used as a smuggler's cove or anything. There goes that story.
Any other questions from the board? Any members of the public have any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? Okay, seeing none. How would the board like to proceed?
I'm happy to move that we close the hearing.
Second.
Move to close by Ken, second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm also happy to move in favor.
Okay.
I'll second.
Move to approve by Ken and Kim.
So in terms of findings, this is a historic structure. It's well-known, actually. So in existence, prior to whatever the bylaw says it has to be, I can't remember.
January 1st, 1980?
1980. Conforms generally to 240-23B. There's no plans, by their own admission, no plans for taking of borders or home occupation. There's significant renovation to repair, for example, the decks and so forth. So they're improving the utilization.
And minimal change to the
Minimal
exterior for
change to the
access.
exterior. Lot coverage no issues with lot coverage. Parking and so forth. So, you have something?
I'm just gonna hop in. So it was, well, some evidence presented that historically it was 10-bedroom home, and now it's proposed as a 6-bedroom unit and a 2-bedroom unit. And testimony was that there was an intention to submit to condominium status, so that would be 2 condo units. And just to jump off the historic, the fact that's historic, that this allows for preservation of the historic home.
And then, in terms of conditions, is that pretty, we happy with findings?
Yeah.
Yep.
24216.
24216.
In terms of conditions, as per the plans, and as we said, no taking of borders, no home occupations. Do we want to include the limitation to the new bedroom count, or?
8 bedrooms?
On the property total. Yeah. Do you usually require the condo docs submitted, Sari? No, no, they'll be recorded.
No, this isn't a development.
Anything else?
But just a finding that it is going to be.
Yes, yeah, and we did that.
Right.
Okay. Motion was made by Ken, second by Kim. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Project.
Good luck, it's beautiful.
Looking forward to the open house.
Thank you.
I missed the tour that they had to go through.
Did they have one?
Yeah, for inspectional services, and Howard was kind enough to invite me, and I couldn't go.
I've been to the tower room.
Have you?
Yeah. You can see in both directions. Pretty sound.
Don't forget your thing out of the drive.
Great for sunsets.
That it is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sunrise, too.
61. Which one are we doing first?
Campion?
Campion.
All right, up next, we have continuation 61-18 Campion.
Attorney Sabat? Sabat. I keep pronouncing it incorrectly. Sabat.
It's an amazing historic house, actually. They really knew how to preserve it.
Good evening. I was going to ask if I don't know what the agenda is this evening, but Mr. Borselli, who is the engineer on this project, has just left the town of Bourne. We're at a conservation hearing tonight, and he's en route right now. And if this is, if you have no other business before you, then I'll get started in the hopes that he comes in the door while I'm presenting.
Want to take the other one out of order?
Yeah, we could take another application out of order,
Right.
waiting for Mr. Baselli, if you don't mind.
All right, yes, I appreciate that very much, thank you.
I would move that we take 076-18 Fenwick out of order.
Okay, motion was made by Ken. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Kim. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Application 76-18 Fenwick.
Do I do it now?
Which one, this one?
I know, but I get them, I guess I get them.
Who is the clerk on this one?
I do it
Kimberly?
right now.
Me.
Okay, good.
All right,
TJ, can I make a disclosure?
sure.
I just would like to disclose that I'm the building commissioner for the town of Dartmouth, Massachusetts, and I'm a resident of the town of Falmouth. Thank you.
Okay. And for the applicant?
Good evening. I'm Edward DeWitt. I'm a local attorney. I don't know, there was a couple of things that we had left addressed. I guess the first one is jurisdiction. I'm not, are we clear on jurisdiction? I think particularly, I sent you a letter on jurisdiction which talks about the inconsistency amongst the appellate courts in terms of their interpretation of this. In the most recent decision is the Warrington decision, and where the court said those cases involved official inaction which, if elevated to true jurisdictional status, would give an administrative official final and unreviewable power to deny applications or enforcement requests, a result surely fundamentally inconsistent with the statutory scheme. Also, if you look at your bylaw at 24202, it talks about a person is an aggrieved person to bring this appeal if they are unable to get enforcement action. Any person aggrieved by reason or of his inability to obtain a permit or enforcement action from any administrative officer under the provisions of Chapter 40A. That's the Falmouth bylaw, which is actually a little bit more demonstratively clear in terms of the jurisdictional nature of this. And finally, I think you have the opinion from town council, and he points out that the board, sua sponte, doesn't have the ability to reject jurisdiction in terms of that. And the courts have been fairly consistent with that. And I think if you take the whole sort of package in totality, it's clear that you do have jurisdiction to this, particularly if you focus on the explicit language of 240-202. We've also, at your request, further elaborated on the exact violations that we're alleging, the issue of lot merger, and how this is a single lot. And if you look at the current owner's deed, that deed expresses a single lot. We've also pointed out that historically, had the Panases not merged the two lots back in 1940, they would have been in violation of zoning. So their actions actually created conformity and not non-conformity. And we've also spelled out the precise relief that we're seeking, which is essentially a series of cease and desists, primarily from using multiple structures on the property for dwelling purposes, but also the operation of commercial accommodations, including lodging or rooming houses on the property without appropriate zoning permits. I think those were the questions that the board had. I'd be happy to answer any additional questions. I would point out that the neighbors are here again tonight and are very interested in trying to resolve this this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney DeWitt. Bob, do you want to start us off with questions?
No questions.
I have no questions.
None. Leave it to the lawyers.
Kim?
Yeah, so I have a question about, not about the jurisdiction, about, you made the point, if the lots had not merged in 1940, you just said this, it would have been in violation. Could you just explain on that a little bit more?
Well, the view from the board's discussion the last time was that there might have been 2 dwelling units on the property in 1944 when the Panises purchased the second parcel. And it was at that time of the purchase that they merged the lots and they created the jewelry laboratory. And that jewelry laboratory establishment, the abandonment of their jewelry shop on Palmer Avenue, is captured in the news accounts, which are in the record and going on. So they in 1944, it was illegal to have 2 dwelling structures on a single lot. And they created a single lot, and then they used the property in conformance with existing zoning at the time. And all during the Panises' life, up until the current owner inherited the property in 2002 or 2003, the property was used in conformity with zoning, with the one exception of the structure setback from Cemetery Lane.
Okay. And then can you also just touch, I know we had talked last time about the 2008 building permit, and there was some discussion about the use, whether there's a use on the face of the permit. Did you follow up on that?
I did, and I thought, did you put the information in the record? I thought that you had.
The information that
She
I
may have.
got from the
Yeah.
building department is in there, yes.
Right, and I would say there's no use implied. The other thing to keep in mind is when he got that building permit in 2008, he displays it as based on the 1935 plan, not the 1944 plan, which is the plan of record, and also his deed. I think that's really important to keep in mind that his deed that he has, the fiduciary deed that he received from the estate, is the same description of the 1944 plan. Meets and bounds are the same. There's no lot division on his deed in terms of that. So you have 2 deeds with a consistent legal description of one single lot on that property.
Okay, so, but the building permit, and I did not have a chance to review this week.
It says it's an addition of 2 bedrooms.
Okay, so it,
So it doesn't give a use, it doesn't
Okay.
say single-family dwelling or.
gotcha.
There's none of that. And the other part of the property isn't even addressed. It's not on the plot plan. It's not on the building plan. It's just not there. So I think it's easy to say that if the building commissioner had bad information, he was going to make a bad decision in terms of approving that. That probably should not have been approved in 2008. But again, we're not asking to have a structure removed. We're merely asking for relief to cease and desist uses that are not in conformity with the zoning bylaw. And I think that's an important, difference here from some of the other cases where the goal was to have something removed. If you look at the SJC case from the Vineyard, it was about removing a structure. We're not asking to have any structures removed. We're asking that the owner use the property in conformance with zoning.
That's all I have.
Ken, any questions?
So I was, when we last spoke, we were getting a little hung up on this question of whether the 30-day period had expired because the building permit was in 2008. Have we?
We're not appealing the building permit.
Right.
You're
just asking for enforcement
of uses.
Of use. And so, am I correct then in thinking the clock started when you made the request?
Yes. And in fact, except with the lone exception where a use is clearly and unambiguously established in some kind of permit, which is not the case here, there is no statute of limitations on use violations.
Okay.
that can be brought at any time. And if there was a procedural defect here, we could start over, so to speak, if we needed to. I don't think that's unnecessary. I will say that I did talk to the building commissioner. I've made reference to this in our letter, and he, as of yesterday, told me he was going to submit something in writing today, which.
He did.
That's what I gave you.
Oh, did he?
Yeah,
in
Kim, you
fact
might
do
want
that?
to, I
I'll read
received
it.
it just before the hearing, which is why
Okay,
you didn't get it.
so we did get something in writing.
And let Kim,
I'll read it. So it's from Rod Palmer, dated Thursday, November 1st, 2018, at 5:20 p.m. It is addressed to Serene Ashley regarding enforcement at 4610 Dwight Place. Dear Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I have taken no action relative to the request for enforcement at 4, 6, and 10 Dwight Place. The complaint dated July 3rd, 2018, containing 18-plus pages of history and information, has been quite challenging to comprehend. The complaint is requesting that I revoke building permits, certificates of occupancies, and to cease and desist all legal uses at the property. At this time, I am not cognizant of the alleged illegal uses or building permits that may have been erroneously issued by the previous building official. The Falmouth Building Department is at this time experiencing an immense volume of building permit applications and is temporarily understaffed, making it difficult to analyze the subject matter. Thank you, Rod Palmer.
And I would point out that from that initial request, we have tempered our request for relief in this case. And that's why I put in writing what specifically we were looking for for relief.
Anything else from the board?
Just a question, in this, your opinion, so the board has the ability to issue these orders, or do we direct the zoning commissioner to issue the cease and desist?
I think under the 200 section of the bylaw, you have the ability to direct a cease and desist. And you can direct the building inspector to enforce it on your behalf.
Is that 240-179?
General
Well-
laws as well,
Oh,
General.
is it, okay, so there's no question in that? Okay, I didn't mean to get in, I just wanted to make sure. No other questions, thank you.
Ken, anything?
No, not at the moment.
Sue, do you have any questions?
well, he says that he doesn't want, there are 2 dwelling structures, you stated?
Yeah, there appears to be at least 2.
Okay, but you're saying that you don't want a building removed, but you're asking for it to come into compliance, which it isn't in compliance if it didn't exist prior to May 1959. There are records in the file, by the way, old assessor's records that were just put in there. It does show 2 dwellings. So you're saying you're not asking for them to remove one structure, just to never use it?
Or to use it as a jewelry laboratory or some other procedure. The current owner was an apprentice of Mrs. Panis, and I believe that was her intent, but, I can't say that of why it was given to her apprentice when she passed away.
Okay. I believe the owners of the property may be here tonight if anybody wants to ask them questions.
Yeah, I'd be interested in their
Are the
take.
O'Donnells here?
I haven't seen them.
No, they said they were going to attend. Too bad. That was my only question, how to abate a violation but still keep, the card does show 2 dwellings.
What year was that from, Serena?
It's in there, it's in the file.
I think that there are possibilities for him to come in and get zoning relief under the zoning bylaw because of what's allowed in the GR district. We don't want to tell him what to do. I think that there are other options, including possibilities with affordable housing and additional units and those kinds of things. The primary use that caused the problem in the neighborhood was when it was being used as a flop house, which is during the pendency of this appeal. It appears to be subsided at this point, and that's why we're asking for the relief, so that it doesn't restart again.
Attorney DeWitt, just to be clear and for the record here tonight, I'm citing your correspondence to the board from 10/25. You're requesting us to do three things. Cease and desist using multiple structures on the property for dwelling purposes. Cease and desist operating commercial accommodations, including a lodging or rooming house on the property, and also to cease and desist storing multiple unregistered or abandoned vehicles on the property.
Correct.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board at this time?
Yeah, I guess just for clarification, so there's three structures out there. So there's the main house that had the addition. There's a long.
Let me get one of the abutters who knows the property better than I do. Judy, can you address what the buildings are?
Okay, so building
You wanna
one.
Name for the record,
Oh,
please.
yes, Judy Fenwick, 18 Mill Road.
Thank you.
There is the cottage that Mrs. Panis occupied, and that's at number 10?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, and then there was the jewelry lab, which is at 6? Okay. And then the addition was put on to the jewelry lab to become a formal dwelling. To my knowledge, the jewelry lab was not a dwelling when Mrs. Panis was still alive. It was her jewelry lab. I don't think anybody slept there. I don't think it had a kitchen. So then the addition became 6B, and the jewelry lab became 6A, and that is based on the mailboxes that existed on the corner of Pin Oak Way and Dwight Place up until maybe 2 months ago, when 6A disappeared, the mailbox disappeared, and the B came off of the mailbox for number 6.
So what appears to be that third structure, that's the one level, is that attached or is that detached?
The long structure that
Long
runs up to
structure with
Cemetery
the
Lane
one
is
door.
the chicken coop, which is a little bit more glorified than a chicken coop at this point, but it's not any kind of a residence, it's storage.
Thank you.
Any other question?
Sure, Jerry.
Probably Attorney DeWitt. It says cease and desist storing multiple unregistered abandoned vehicles. I thought maybe it could help. Isn't there a bylaw that says how many abandoned unregistered vehicles you can have on a property?
You can have one, and we've cited the reference in the bylaw, and
missed.
that has been, he had the vehicles towed out. Again, during the pendency of this appeal, and we're more or less trying to protect ourselves from that resurrecting itself. In fact, some of the vehicles that were towed away were initially not even identified as unregistered vehicles, and that's why you have the police report in the record, because the vehicles because they had plates on them, they had to be towed with the assistance of the police department. So there was even more cars than what the neighbors thought because they had plates on them at the time.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board?
Could you just remind us when the, Mrs. Panis died and this was conveyed?
Yes, you have the deed, and so it was conveyed on 6/27/2003, and I believe she died in 2002.
And the issue is that jewelry lab was not in use for habitation in January 1981.
That's correct. It was not used after 1944 up until and beyond her death.
Any other questions from the board? Sari, anything? Turn it to public comment. Any questions, comments, concerns regarding this project? And I'd ask that it would have to reflect anything regarding new information that we've received. Okay, seeing none. Would the board like to have some discussion, perhaps?
Yeah.
Paul, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, so the request is, it's an appeal of the building officials to, well, he hasn't made a determination, but we're being asked to, well, are we being asked to step in the shoes of the building official based on the fact that this is an appeal?
Yes.
I'm not, I don't feel comfortable doing that because we don't know the facts. All this stuff is fact-specific. That's how you get to the bottom of this stuff. I realize the property owner's not here. That doesn't help. We have correspondence from the building official that doesn't say he's not going to do something about it. He doesn't have the time right now. I mean, there's no way that I am going to direct the building official to do anything because none of us know anything about this. It's just based on these representations. We have no idea if the jewelry lab was ever lived in or it wasn't lived in. And again, it's too bad that the property owner is not here. That would be very helpful. But in terms of, you know, just speaking for myself, I'm not going near this yet. And I think that, you know, based on the building official's letter, the abutters are going to have to accept it and find out from him when he can look into it. And see if he can gather the facts and notify the property owner and let him take enforcement action through the bylaw, through whatever it is he observes and asks them for cooperation. They don't cooperate. He fines them, whatever he's going to do. But, I mean, I'm not going near it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Paul. Jerry, I think you wanted to say something?
Well, it's just more discussion. I thought it was clear that we're taking we don't have to ask the building commissioner to do anything. We can, under our own bylaw and the Massachusetts general laws. I'm asking a question of more knowledgeable people. We can take this action independent of the building commissioner. We're not ordering him to do anything.
No, we have to direct him to do it.
You direct the
Direct
building
him to do
commissioner.
it.
Okay, so we don't have independent authority to take enforcement action.
No,
Thought attorney.
goes through him
Okay, I was,
if he chooses to take the directive.
I'm curious as to Kim's feelings now
Oh,
that we
well,
have more information.
yes,
Because
so
you had strong
I
opinions.
still have strong feelings, so I don't think, I mean, I appreciate Attorney Duffy's submission. I don't think he says one way or the other.
He doesn't.
Which is what all good lawyers do, I suppose, except for when they're advocating. But I still think that we don't have jurisdiction. I understand the case law in this area. I think it's got to be more than a 2-week delay, or 4-week delay, or, you know, and certainly I think Rod's statement to the effect, he doesn't say he's not going to do anything. He says what the classic example is, and what's been repeatedly recognized by the courts, is that building department officials are busy. This 14-week is advisory. It's not, 14-day, excuse me, is advisory. It's not mandatory. So I think it's too soon. So from a jurisdictional perspective, and I certainly, I think it was said, I think it might have been said tonight that we don't have the ability to question if no one else raises it, and I don't think that that's appropriate. I think we can say, we think this is too soon, we don't want to assume jurisdiction, and certainly, so from that perspective, jurisdiction, I said it last week, I felt strongly about it, I still feel strongly about it. So as a preliminary step, I'm with Paul, I'm not going to vote in favor. But then even when you get into the facts, and I think this has a lot to do with the fact that we don't have a decision from the building inspector, because a lot of this is kind of fuzzy. And so I think, I mean, there's some testimony, we think that, certainly the cottage, okay, that's a house. Jewelry, we the bedrooms were added to it. We think it was never used like this. And is that credible evidence? I mean, in my opinion, it's not really. I think that there's a lot of surmising about what's going on, but not kind of hard facts. The other thing is, they're looking for an order. So the first, cease and desist using multiple structures on the on the property for dwelling purposes. I mean, they added 2 bedrooms to that jewelry cottage. Does that signify it can be used as a dwelling? I would think so. If the use isn't on the permit, I think that could be a tough thing. Maybe that's still open to challenge. So maybe that's okay. But cease and desist operating commercial accommodations. Well, now we've been told that that's not going on anymore. So how can we order something to cease and desist that doesn't exist? It would be no different from us doing that on any other property. We know it's existed, maybe. They say it's existed, but it doesn't exist today. So why would we order that? And the same thing about the storing the multiple unregistered or abandoned vehicles. Now we hear that those have been removed. Well, we wouldn't order that of anyone else who's not storing. So to me, it just doesn't make in my opinion, I think that there's a lot of issues. And I think we're missing probably a lot of facts. And I agree with Paul. I think,
You're right, there's no question about it. I don't have a clue what they're doing. I drove on there by accident, and I don't have a clue what they're doing.
right. And I'm sure that I know I don't come across as sympathetic, but I am sympathetic. I understand the neighbors are frustrated by the process, but there is a process. You appeal to the building commissioner. He's the one who should really be kind of analyzing, digging into these things. And
Definitely.
And certainly if it gets to the point where he's not doing that, but there's other avenues, and I think we need to have a clearer idea of what's going on out there. I think for us to say, don't use it as multiple dwellings.
Right. I mean, wasn't the original request of it was for us to ask them to come for a special permit?
Right. No.
Not to issue a cease and desist, as I recall. And the thing I have some sympathy for is the frustration that abutters feel because they don't get a response. And even a response like this is superior, where it says, look, I'm too busy, I can't get to it. But at least now they're aware that he's aware of it, and he will take some action. But then the question becomes, okay, so how long is appropriate? A month, 2 months, a year?
Well, I think the case law certainly doesn't support 2 weeks or a month,
Fair enough.
So that's where I'm kind of the guiding point.
Are we able to say, please respond by a certain date?
I mean, right now, you're looking at July, it's been 4 months.
Yes, but not when they took the appeal.
No, I understand that, but I just personally, I don't think this is an appropriate answer from a building commissioner. I understand it says that I just don't have time, but you make time. I mean, that's the whole point when you have these issues come up. And this could be, he might not have time for 6 months, he might not have time for another year. And that's gonna add to the frustration. I'm a bit disappointed by his response, and that it took this to get a response saying, I just don't have
I
time.
don't disagree. So let me ask you a question. What do you do then? Say you reach the merits.
Well, I think there's other problems with it. We need to see proof that they're using it as a rooming house, something concrete. There should be some kind of a response from the property owner. Something should go out to the property owner, but again, the building commissioner, it's back in his court again. But there should be something we can do to at least try to speed the process along, or ask that there's some kind of a deadline, or,
If you want testimony on the rooming house, we've got 12 people here who will get up and talk to you about that. They have personal knowledge of it.
I mean,
My conversation with the owner says that they have moved back to the property, which is why I was hoping they were here, because this is just basically hearsay from me to you. There's still no proof, unless there's testimony, current testimony, that there is actually several people living there. According to the O'Donnells, they have asked people to leave the property.
What's to stop them?
So unless there's information that they have seen it recently, according to them, the abandoned and unregistered vehicles are gone.
So
According to the O'Donnells,
what's
the
to stop
people
them
have
from,
left.
this goes by and then they start it all over, you know?
What's
Well, I
to
think
stop
we can.
anybody from
Well, I think
complying
we
with the
can. I
zoning
think
bylaw?
if we have sympathy for.
I think they should.
Wait a minute, please.
Come in.
I think if we have sympathy for the neighbors, and we are a quasi-judicial board, we can force the judicial issue by taking an action. Now, some people may question the legality of the action, but that's what courts are for. I think what we could do is force this action, either, maybe the selectmen will take note, the building commission will take note. I don't think we can continue this for 6 months, but I think we're doing a disservice as a quasi-judicial board, that, you know, we're just gonna let this slip and that they can move houses, occupants back in, they can move cars back in. They could do that forever.
Well, I think.
And I know you don't have the vote, it's a denial.
I mean, clearly, though, obviously, it's gotten the attention of the building official. The owners have spoken with Suri. This is something that Rod can handle. He's gonna have to send a registered letter, like you have to do, and get these people to his office and say, what are you doing there? And there'll be a dialogue and a discussion, probably a site visit, and he'll be able to ultimately get to the bottom of it. What's the time frame? Ask him.
But see, that's the problem.
Yeah, but I mean.
You know that he has to
we
do
can't
it. Can you at least request that he give us some kind of a time frame for it?
I mean, I don't know, but I'm just saying, specifically, we're being asked to do a few things tonight. I'm not voting in favor of that. This is something
Well,
Rod can handle when he has time to do it. When, I don't know. They can't keep help here in Falmouth. It's, you know, and that's that gives the abutters no satisfaction. I completely understand that. But I mean, none of us know anything about this.
Territory that I think is a little beyond the purview. I understand what you're saying, but
Why, what's beyond, what did I say?
just the staffing levels at the building department.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, whatever, that's just a general comment, but in terms of this, we don't know the facts. The building inspector can get to the facts. They'll answer his registered letter.
And there is a procedure in place. There are remedies available that don't involve taking an appeal of a non-decision to this board, and we talked about those last time. And I understand it's not as easy, perhaps, and it's, you know, there's a cost
That's the adamus, or
involved.
whatever you call it.
A mandamus action.
mandamus,
But
okay.
that, I've done that on behalf of clients. It's not great, but it's an avenue, and so
Okay.
that's my perspective on it.
So
anyways.
Kim, I was reading some of this case law that was sent
Yes.
to us. Do you still feel we have no jurisdiction?
I feel,
Because it sounded to me,
we've
it sounded to me
assumed.
like reading that there was a case in which they said you cannot deny jurisdiction.
No, we've assumed jurisdiction. Certain times where we've where you can okay, we're not going to raise this procedural issue, and perhaps we could have said, hey, you know what, we're not concerned, we're not going to raise this. From my perspective, based on my understanding of the law and the case law, this is very quick, and it's quicker than cases have found.
I could agree with
Yeah.
the idea that the building commissioner deserves more time. I can agree with the idea that we should not just overturn his decision, because there hasn't been an opportunity, or his non-decision, there hasn't been an opportunity to really suss out the facts. No site visits, no testimony from the landowners, et cetera. I can agree with all of that. What leaves me feeling uncomfortable is if we say there's no circumstance under which
No.
we could hear an appeal of the building commissioner's non-action.
We've
Because
done it
then you
before.
leave everyone in Falmouth.
We've
Just let me
had those
finish.
cases.
Yeah.
Everyone in Falmouth, there's no recourse except going to the courts. And I think, I agree with Jerry. I think we're here to be that outlet.
So since I've been on the board, we have done that. It's been 6 months, it's been 8 months, it's been a year, it's been a longer period of time than a couple of weeks. And so we have done that. I can think of some cases off the top of my head where we've done that. But the other thing that you don't want to do is create this issue where Rod legitimately can't get to something for 2 weeks, and then we have an appeal of a non-decision. That's a dangerous thing to start doing as well.
I can
Can
agree
we-
with that.
Yeah.
But,
Could we
so that
continue
leaves me, last point.
Okay, sorry.
Wondering, can we at least send them an advisory letter saying, you know, you ought to get to this within 6 months?
That's not your role.
I don't know, I mean,
Could we continue it? You know, maybe that's,
Or
no.
we don't want to continue it indefinitely. I don't
Well,
think.
we're saying we want to give the building commissioner some time to act. And maybe you don't normally continue something 6 months, but if you continue it 6 months, you're putting people on notice. Or maybe if we don't find in behalf of the petitioner, they can still come back in 6 months.
They can also appeal.
They certainly can.
They can appeal our decision. That's going back to court though, right?
Yes.
It's going
Yeah.
to court.
Yeah.
Haven't gone there yet.
No, well, I mean,
Yeah.
the first one may be easier.
But there are avenues to push this forward.
Right, I just don't think that we should abrogate our responsibility and force everyone to go to court every single time they have an objection.
I don't
to-
disagree.
And one of the big issues we face is enforcement of the zoning bylaw.
It
I
hasn't
don't-
been
I
answered
don't
yet.
disagree, Ken.
But why can't we
Answer. I
continue
agree.
this for 6 months? Maybe we don't like to, maybe is it legally possible to continue
You
this
don't
for 6 months?
continue a hearing to
Continue.
get a response.
You don't continue, we continue a hearing.
You're asking to continue this in hopes that the building commissioner will then,
No, in hopes of the owner will provide information.
Well,
I mean, if the answer is no, but maybe what you just said, we continue it for 6 months
is
and
an
hoping that the
appeal.
building commissioner will do
This is
it.
an
Can
appeal
we
of
do
the
it? It
building
might not be
commissioner.
practical, but can we continue it?
What-
I mean, it's up to
Yeah,
the
so let
board,
me- so-
obviously.
So the owner doesn't have any obligation to provide information or participate,
Right,
which they haven't done yet.
correct.
And then if Rod Palmer does issue a decision in that instance, there would be an obligation on the petitioners to separately appeal that decision.
But if he
So that
does,
would render this decision, this
if he
action
doesn't
kind of
issue a
moot.
decision in 6 months, what would the board feel? How long are we gonna give the building commissioner to act, given that he's,
That's my issue
I mean-
with these in general, and I
when
understand it's
somebody
complicated.
appeals, then everything's in a stay mode. So he didn't respond because they've appealed his decision.
Well, they haven't appealed his decision, they've appealed
His non-decision.
his non-decision.
And his answer
That's
is
what I'm
basically,
saying.
They should
I'll
ask
get to it when
for
I get to
action.
it.
Once he makes the decision, then it'll be easier to appeal the decision.
So do you want to get back to the burden of
yeah, the
proof and
facts
what
as
actually
presented tonight,
is there instead of debate how
voted
you're
up or
going to go
voted down.
forward? Because I think that will determine how you're going to make a
I mean,
decision.
I don't think, yeah, I would agree, we do not have the evidence necessary to mandate any abandonment of use or
Yeah, like,
change of use or, you know.
We know
is
we
that-
don't have any
about this.
facts before us at all
Yeah.
that start, calling the shots here. I mean,
And I-
Because we need third party, not, can't be the plaintiff, can't be, it's gotta be him going on the site and saying, I discovered this, this, and this as
Yeah, I mean, I think,
violations.
I think we could in certain circumstances say a plaintiff has presented enough information, or a petitioner has, but I just think here, there's a lot of speculation as to what's going on. There's nothing credible, in my opinion.
I think we know what the answer of the board's gonna be. Why? I can't make a motion, or I would, to,
I mean,
put a positive or negative motion up and have it up or down.
So I'll move to close the public hearing.
second.
Move to close by Kim, second by Paul. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I,
Was that a unanimous vote?
I believe it was. Anyone opposed?
no, and I will move that we deny, appeal number 7618.
Second.
Motion's made by Kim. Paul, did you second? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We don't have to give reasons?
How many was that? Excuse me.
All fine.
Any,
No, I'm gonna vote against.
any opposed?
Yeah, I'm gonna vote against.
So what is it, a 4-1?
4-1.
Thank you.
And we don't have to give the reasons?
You don't have to.
Oh, okay.
But, I mean, basically, the discussion is basically your findings, I guess. if
I
you
don't
wanna
do
go with
issue
that.
findings.
You want to make specific,
No
you don't
credible.
have to with the denial, but if you
Well, no,
want to.
procedurally, we just deny.
Basically, there's not enough information.
Got the building inspector's attention, he'll get on.
Okay, let's,
Do you have another version?
I hate to
just
ask
circled
this,
this
but
one.
can we take a little bit of a break?
Again? We'll take a 5-minute break.
I've been drinking a lot of coffee.
I didn't have time to stop.
and Bob.
Yeah, good. It depends on whether you guys are going out or not.
Well, you have to stick around.
Good evening, and thank you again for allowing me to wait for Mr. Borselli to arrive. I wanted to, this evening, very briefly, I know you've had a long night, and you gave us a lot of time last time, but I wanted to just recapitulate a little bit on what our position is and summarize our appeal, and then address some of the points that have been made by Mr. Geoffroy's team in opposition to our appeal. As you may recall, the building department, then under Mr. Ladio Gore, in 2011, made a certification to the Department of Environmental Protection in the application that was being submitted by then Mr. Millette, who was my client's predecessor in title at 20 Sheridan Avenue. That certification was that the proposed project, the repair of this existing seawall, was in compliance with zoning bylaws in the town of Falmouth. And I've quoted it, and you have a copy of the actual certification. In addition, the plans were filed with the planning board. The application was filed with the planning board, and there's a certification to that effect. I pointed out to the board, both in the written appeal and orally in my presentation, that the DEP regulations and the State Enabling Act require that before an application can proceed, that there must be a certification by the local zoning official that, in fact, the project will not violate zoning. And the reason for that is, the rationale for that is, that, in my mind, is that the DEP does not want to authorize a structure in Commonwealth tidelands that will ultimately be subjected to an enforcement order that it be removed, which is exactly the case that we find ourselves in tonight. I provided you with two administrative law decisions that emphasize that in some language in which they talk about that as being a precondition. When we were here last time, the opposition pointed to a section of the actual DEP permit that was issued to Mr. Millette, or in the name of Mr. Millette, Section 7, and they quoted it as, this waterways license is granted subject to all applicable federal, state, county, and municipal laws, ordinances, and regulations. And they referred to that as evidence of the patent falsehood of my representation to you that that somehow or other zoning may not override the DEP, which is not what I suggested. In my mind, Section 7 that they quoted from the license doesn't illustrate any patent falsehood, but rather the patent truth of what I'm saying. The reason that the DEP, again, this reinforces the idea that the DEP does not want to issue a license that, in fact, is going to be inconsistent with municipal ordinances and bylaws, which is exactly the reason why they want the certification in the first place from the town. Now, this entire matter all began with an illegal dock that Mr. Geoffroy had at his property. If you remember correctly, he had a float that he connected to his bulkhead. And in 2016, he was ordered by the Conservation Administrator to remove it. And shortly thereafter, he then attempted to occupy, in fact did occupy, my client's bulkhead that had been permitted by the DEP, and then ultimately in 2017 occupied, tied up to her dock. And we were compelled then to commence an action in the Superior Court in an effort to restrain him from doing that. And as you know, or may recall, a preliminary injunction was issued by the Barnstable Superior Court in March of 2018, ordering and restraining Mr. Geoffroy from tying up to my client's bulkhead or dock. And it was almost immediately thereafter that the request for enforcement was then made to the building commissioner, arguing that my client was required back in 2011 to obtain relief under Section 240-78. And I suggested to you then, and I suggest to you again, that the motivation for this clearly was to use the building commissioner, to use the town as an instrument in this lawsuit as a part of his effort to obtain control of my client's dock and her bulkhead. And as a matter of fact, I can tell you that we had a hearing in July in which Mr. Geoffroy's attorneys attempted to obtain an order from the court revoking the preliminary injunction. And one of the things that they tried to introduce was the building commissioner's enforcement letter, which brings us here tonight. And I argued that it was irrelevant in that case, and the court agreed with me that that was not relevant to the court's proceeding. But I think it illustrates exactly what the motivation here is in seeking enforcement. Now, one of the things that I pointed out was that typically, under the case law, which is very clear, if one is going to appeal from a decision of the building commissioner, that has to be done within 30 days. And I've cited the various cases to you, and I cited one case in which there was in fact not a building permit, because one of the things that the building commissioner said back to me in a letter was that, well, those cases are all building permit cases, and I cited a case in which there was a simple decision by a building commissioner as to the legality of a road. I think that's the Matthias case that I provided you copies with. And the court said that that is an act that would trigger the 30-day appeal period. So it doesn't have to be a building permit to trigger that period. I also argued that Mr. Geoffroy would be guilty of laches, clearly, because he knew full well what was transpiring here before the Conservation Commission. He was given notice of that. He knew full well what was transpiring before the DEP. He was given notice of that. He sat there and watched the construction of this repair project and didn't say one word. And it isn't until 7 years later that he now raises an objection to this. Now, the other side has responded by saying, well, laches can't be used against your municipality, and I haven't argued that it should be, or that it can be. I'm aware of that. You can't argue laches against the town of Falmouth, or against any town for that matter, in terms of its enforcement. But I think that you can weigh that in your deliberation as to whether or not Mr. Geoffroy should be entitled to the relief that he is seeking, in that he has waited all of this time. The motivation for this is clear. It involves his effort to obtain control of my client's dock. It hasn't got anything to do with any genuine interest in obtaining enforcement of zoning. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when the building commissioner was questioned last time, and it's my memory that you asked him about why he reached the decision that he reached in terms of the merits of this. And it's my memory that he said that he went out to the site and he looked at the project and he determined that it was more than a repair. Those are the words that I remember from him. And he may have said that he looked at the plans, but I just can't recall. But I do remember that he talked about going out to the site and he concluded that it was more than a repair. And I draw from that that implicit in that is that he would agree with his predecessor that a repair would not require a submission to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And again, I'm speculating based upon what I've been told. I wasn't there, I didn't speak to Mr. Gore 7 years ago. Based upon what I've been told, that has been the interpretation of the building department, that the repair of an existing structure would not require referral under 240 Section 78. So the current building commissioner did not say, I disagree with that interpretation, or that the bylaw's wrong, or that he applied it incorrectly. He said that he determined that this was more than a repair. He made a subjective determination based on his observation of the circumstances. So, in other words, he's not saying that the certification was wrong because the bylaw was improperly interpreted, or that the bylaw would otherwise apply. He's saying that he disagrees with it because he comes to a different conclusion as to the nature of the work that was involved. And I think that's significant because when you weigh, again, all of the circumstances of this, and I'm going to talk about the equities when I get in my comments, when you weigh in the circumstances of all of this, and given the fact that the certification is part of a regulatory structure that the DEP has established to make sure that it is not running afoul of local zoning, that becomes significant as to what the grounds are for now vacating the previous certification. And if we allow, I think, a building commissioner 7 years later, after the fact, to take a different view of the set of facts, and then to, effectively what he's doing is rescinding or revoking the certification that was made previously, then I have to ask the rhetorical question of what value then is the certification to the Department of Environmental Protection? It's of no value. It's a pointless exercise. And so for that reason, I've argued, and I find no case law that says that a building commissioner in this particular legislative scheme of regulation is entitled or authorized to rescind or revoke a certification. There's nothing that I can find to that effect. And in this case, I would submit that there are no grounds for him to do that. Now, let me get to the argument that has been made by the opposition in terms of this as-built plan that was presented or that was part of the DEP application. And they jump to some very far-fetched conclusions. That there was somehow, an intentional effort to mislead the Conservation Commission, that there was an intentional effort to mislead the building commissioner. They really engage in some pretty significant hyperbole based upon their review of this plan. But let me talk about that, if I may, and respond to that. I'm going to ask Mr. Borselli at some point to respond to the specifics of it. But what was presented to the Conservation Commission was a proposal that the Millettes be allowed to place vinyl sheeting in front of the seawall. And the narrative that was presented to the Conservation Commission, if you give me a minute to find it. This is the narrative that was presented at the time of the notice of intent. Stated, the project involves construction of a vinyl sheet piling structure directly adjacent to, in front of the existing stone seawall. That was the proposal. And that's what's shown in the plan, that vinyl sheeting is going to be placed in front of the wall. And in fact, the wall that's shown in the plan prepared by Mr. Borselli is a slightly tapered wall. And it turned out when they got on to the project site and they began the work that the wall was effectively more tapered than what was originally understood. And what he drew in on that plan was he drew in a dashed line showing what was allowed, namely the installation of vinyl sheeting adjacent to and in front of the stone wall. And if you look at that exhibit plan, in fact, if you look at Mr. Borselli's material, which we submitted in response to this, and I have copies here if you don't have them with you, I can distribute them to you if you want.
We have the copies.
Do you have the copies with you?
We do.
If you look at Mr. Borselli's submission, and it's this plan right here, which is the sheet 3 of 3, which is the critical piece. This, first of all, is the plan that was appended to the application to the DEP. And I pointed this out last time. If you remember correctly, I submitted copies of this. I pointed out to the board that this is the plan that was given to the DEP, that was a part of the application, that would have been seen by Mr. Gore. And that's significant because this is dated January 13, 2011, which is the time frame in which the certification was made. The plan that Mr. McGrath is analyzing is the final licensing permitted plan that was approved by DEP, which is a year later. It's dated in 2012. So that clearly is not the plan that Mr. Gore examined. Now, in terms of the dashed line, they're the same. There's no difference there. But this plan, that's the draft plan, shows the existence of riprap, which was removed during this repair process. And so what I'm trying to say to you is that if you look at this plan, you can see there's a stone. If you count the outer stones, you count 1, 2 up. Those are the toe stones. And then you go in and you see a smaller stone. That's the front of the wall. And remember, this is a schematic. I mean, if we went out there and we uncovered that wall today, there are stones of different sizes all along that wall. And this is a schematic showing that what the Conservation Commission permitted was initially a placement of vinyl sheeting adjacent to and in front of the existing stone wall. What transpires is that they discover that there are these toe stones. They call the conservation agent. If they remove the toe stones, this whole thing's going to collapse into the Falmouth Harbor. So the decision is made in the field to place the vinyl sheeting beyond the face of the toe stones in order to preserve the wall. And what they then did is they removed all of the riprap from the surface, the subsurface, the substrate, so that they could install this vinyl sheeting. And so in that sense, I submit that there's no mistake here, there's no misleading here. This is showing exactly what was allowed by the Conservation Commission. But I think more to the point, Mr. Gore, as the building commissioner, would have been more interested in what is the relationship of what was constructed, because remember, this was already constructed when he reviewed this. What was constructed versus what existed previously? How do those two things relate? That's what a building commissioner, in my mind, is going to be looking at. Not how does the new construction relate to what conservation may have permitted, but rather it's his determination, or it's his job to determine how does the new construction relate to the pre-existing stone wall. And so even if there is an error, and I don't agree that there is in this particular plan, it's not relevant to the inquiry that we have in front of us, and it wasn't relevant to the inquiry that Mr. Gore had. We don't have the benefit of having him here tonight, so we don't know what process he engaged in to reach the determination that he did. But common sense would tell you that what he was looking at was, what is the relationship of the new vinyl encasement over this existing stone wall? And from that standpoint, made a determination that therefore no zoning relief was required. So it's my position that this is not germane, it's not crucial, it's not material to the actual issues that were in play. And Mr. Boselli will address this a little bit more, but if you look at the very last photograph in this package, this is going to show you, this shows you what this repair looked like at the time that it was being undertaken. And you can see the original stone wall on the right-hand side. They've taken off the concrete cap, and you can see the vinyl sheeting, and you can see the timber frame that is put on the outside. And what you're looking at is a very narrow gap. And the difference here is that what was allowed to remain was the stone wall remained in place. Now, one of the things that I said last time was that, and just to refresh you on this, is that the DEP in the permit that was issued to the Campions, or to Millet, they determined that there was a displacement of 7 cubic yards. Now, what does that mean in relation to anything else? Well, One of the things Mr. Geoffroy said, or his lawyer said, in their effort to seek enforcement was, when Mr. Geoffroy undertook his work on his wall, he was required to go to the Board of Appeals under 240, Section 78. Well, what Mr. Geoffroy did was to remove the pre-existing stone wall, and replace it with a brand-new structure. And his license, in fact, says that he displaced 19 cubic yards, almost 3 times what was displaced by this project in front of the Millet, now Campion property. Similarly, the next neighbor down that's south of Mr. Geoffroy, he did the same thing. He removed his wall and replaced it. He was required apparently to go to the Board of Selectmen. His displacement was 120 cubic yards. So we're talking about vastly different projects than what occurred here. And finally, or not finally, but one of the things that Mr. McGrath says in his report is that he says the existence of the stones on the bottom was common knowledge, as other plans of repairs of stone seawalls on abutting lands all showed stones on the bottom of Falmouth Inner Harbor. Well, Mr. McGrath at one point represented Mr. Strakish, who was the neighbor to the north. He was Mr. Strakish's engineer through the permitting DEP process. Mr. Strakish opposed the Millet repair project. Mr. McGrath was the representative. And he submitted some pre-filed testimony that was submitted under oath. And in that testimony, he stated that Exhibit 12, which is the plan accompanying the application for the license, which is the plan is attached to the back of Mr. Borselli's letter, represents the actual construction. However, the conditions on the ground vary with what is depicted on the plans, and the discrepancies are significant. Referring to sheet 3 of plans in Exhibit 12, the plans show a cross-section through the work. I have observed the conditions on the ground, and I see no riprap or bed of stones existing on the bottom at the seaward face of the timber facing. The plans depict continuous stones along the bottom. I see no such stones on the bottom. He then goes on to say that this is critical, his next paragraph, in that the Millet plans in Exhibit 12 show that the vinyl sheet pile can be driven through the stones. If the stones do not exist, which is what he's saying here, in the bottom as shown on the plan, then the vinyl sheets could have been driven closer to the old seawall. This is completely contrary to what he is saying today, which is that it was common knowledge that these stones existed. And yet, before the DEP 7 years ago, during the appeal, he indicated that he saw no such stones. And that, in fact, because there were no such stones, the vinyl sheeting could have been placed closer to the wall. Now, one of the things that I did is I presented 2 cases that I sent this past week to you. And one of those is an older case that goes back to 1969, which is under the old 40A. And that talks about equitable principles. And that essentially says that under certain circumstances where there would be substantial hardship and where there might otherwise be, someone might be entitled to specific relief of the enforcement of zoning provisions, relief can be denied on recognized equitable principles. And that same concept was reaffirmed or affirmed by the Supreme Judicial Court in its decision of 2012, which is this Shirley Wayside Limited Partnership case. And again, here, even though this was a proposition from old 40A back in 1969, they cited this case. And they gave that as a reason, namely equitable principles of fairness, as a reason as to why they would not uphold the enforcement of a zoning setback requirement. So let me conclude this way with you. Given the circumstances of this, namely that you have a certification that was made in 2011, which at this point is 7 years ago, over 7 years ago, it was made in January of 2011. And given the impetus for this complaint that has been made by someone who has waited all of this time, and given the fact that the current building commissioner has not really questioned the interpretation of the bylaw, but really has come to a different subjective view as to what the circumstances are on the site, I would submit that if nothing else, equitable principles would demand here that you overturn the building commissioner's decision. And in that way, you're not really abandoning him or undermining him. You have the ability and the authority to look at the larger picture, which he doesn't have. He has a more specific task. So I would ask you, for the reasons that I cited, to overturn the building commissioner. Now, I'd like to make this request. I don't know how you want to proceed here, but I know that Mr. McGrath and Mr. Parmenter want to make their presentation. And I think since there are some engineering concepts here, I would like to allow Mr. Borselli to respond once their presentation is completed.
I think that might be appropriate.
Well, I mean, I would suggest that you go right now, and we can just respond to everything that they have all
It's
at
not
once.
about
That way
engineering,
we
it's
can go
about the
back and
building
forth.
commissioner's determination. So you want
I'm
to
sorry,
talk,
Suri?
you want to talk with the board, see how you're going to
Well,
proceed?
yeah, I mean, I would
The
just,
board.
I would just say, I mean, we had a full presentation on this last time, and now we're 20 minutes in, it's 9:20 at night. So I don't know if we need to, maybe if we have specific questions, perhaps?
Well, maybe I could have him address it now. I mean, remember, we were told about this for the first time at the last hearing, namely what their position was, and we received their detailed analysis was sent out on October the 18th. So I think in fairness, and this submission now makes some serious allegations about Mr. Borselli. So I think if nothing else, we really should you should allow him to respond to those and to give his position on this.
It's whatever the board wants.
It's what was submitted to the file and forwarded to you guys. Do you all have a copy?
Right, when we
So
we
what
are
is
in
the
receipt
board?
of that. We all have
October
cop-
31st.
We all have copies.
We
of
have
that.
copies of the bones and rocks.
Difference of opinion in
Right.
engineers.
Any opinion from the board?
I mean, I don't care.
Unless it's different from the letter, I mean, we've got the letter.
I don't care who goes first, but I think I'd like to hear counterpoint from the engineers.
And I will just say, for the record, to the extent
You want to get up to the podium if the chair recognizes you, please? Chairman Hurry.
Jackson Parmenter on behalf of the abutter Vincent Jeffroy. For the record, we received Mr. Borselli's report today. I received it today. And so we likewise have had no time to respond. Actually, Mr. McGrath had put together something immediately today to respond to the comments made by Mr. Borselli. So to the extent that there are accusations that we somehow pulled a fast one over the board or over my brother by submitting something at the last minute.
No one's claiming that.
I don't think that's what it says.
Right, well,
Nobody said that.
excuse me, I just want to make the record clear that if Mr. Borselli goes forward, we have an adequate opportunity to respond to it.
We're getting into,
So that's what I was just gonna say, so, yeah, I think obviously these property owners have other litigation going on, and I think it's very easy for it to kind of spiral out of control. The question is whether they need a relief and whether it was appropriate for Rod Palmer to revoke the certification at this point. I mean, it's
Right, that's
pretty,
it.
yes,
That's it.
yeah. So,
does the board want to discuss? Or,
well, I think,
or how are you going to proceed?
You know, not to belabor this, but we got Falmouth Engineering's response October 31st.
It's his response to his October
But we
18th
we
letter.
haven't heard Mr. McGrath's response. And we haven't even seen it.
How many times are we going to go back and forth?
Well, if board doesn't want to hear
I
it.
have enough information, I don't want to hear anything from anyone else.
Oh,
well, we
okay.
need to, no.
Yeah, I mean, other than, but, I mean.
Well, I mean,
I
everybody
don't.
has had an opportunity to.
I don't need any more information, that's me.
Oh, I think that's,
I may
haven't
not
even had
need
a chance to rebut the new arguments that were made today.
You can give each person 5 minutes, but you're going to have to vote to go into overtime.
Right.
So if you want to limit the time, that's appropriate as well, because we don't want to get into going back and forth
Yeah.
constantly. So it's up to the board. make a decision.
Well, one, we should go into overtime, right?
All right,
Let's limit the time to the 5 minutes now, and then we'll see what happens at 9:30.
if,
You nailed the substance of it.
Well, but I do think it's appropriate for the opposing counsel to respond. But I do think it's easy to get kind of into that back and forth. And, I mean, we have all of the materials too. It's not as if we don't have hard copies of materials in the respective parties' positions.
Sure, and frankly, for the record, I thought that we were very limited in what we were gonna discuss tonight, that being latches and the difference in the plans, and now that's obviously escalated into something
You
further than
can
that. but-
discuss just that. That would be.
part of the issue is if
And
you're
that
not
was my
aware, we need
intention.
to, we need to, by vote of the board, we need to extend discussion at 9:30. So that's part of something that we're dealing with.
Understood.
Given that time's an issue, I think, Suri, like you said, it might be appropriate for each party, five minutes each to explain their side, given the time restraints and everything.
It's,
how does everyone else feel about that?
I have no problem with it.
I'm fine with
We
that.
grant
Limit
the
it to
time
5 minutes for
extension
each
now,
side.
so people know how much we're gonna be going beyond 9:30. 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
without
10
getting
o'clock.
into the minutia.
Well, we don't have to get into the minutia. People need to know how much time we're gonna have to discuss this, especially the,
This is about the building commissioner's determination, not going back and forth between engineers is what I'm trying to say. If the attorney wants to speak, it's certainly up to the board. I'm just saying, you're gonna need to vote to extend beyond 9:30.
anyways. I mean, I would have liked to have some discussion on two people that convinced that they don't need any more information. No, seriously, I mean, that may sway me that, because it may be a simple.
Nobody's trying to sway anybody. All the information's in the file. Can the board make a decision,
It's not sway
a
to make a
vote?
decision one way or the other.
Can the
If
board
it-
make a
Yeah,
vote
so
to
I
go
think
on
it's- I think
beyond
we always
9:30?
allow, once there's an attorney presenting, we allow the opposing attorney to respond to those points. I think that's appropriate. Perhaps we don't need to get into the engineering's
Okay,
disagreement, just from my perspective, Jerry. I don't, perhaps we don't need to get into it, from a personal perspective. I mean, these engineers appear before us every week, and so I don't think it's a great thing to be kind of engaging in this back and forth. It's not beneficial for the board, but I think as to the application, it makes sense. So with that said, I will move that we extend until 9:45 with the hopes that we are
Yes,
finished
thank
with
you.
the hearing at
Thank
that
you.
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I appreciate that, thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I appreciate the time. I know it is late. And once again, I think we were here late last time. But I do want to limit my presentation to what your specific questions were last time. And let's start off with latches. Let's start out with personal latches. You heard my brother concede that latches cannot apply as to a building commissioner. It can't. We're trying to twist this entire proceeding into almost an appeal by my client. What my client did here was brought a concern to a building commissioner in the town of Falmouth, who engaged in his own independent investigation and determined that the Campions, one, needed a special permit, and secondarily needed a building permit. My client is not the one appealing. Latches cannot possibly apply to his conduct relative to advising a building commissioner as to a continuing violation. The case law is clear. It's cited in my papers. I won't belabor that because I think our Supreme Judicial Court has made that clear time and again. With respect to the cases which my brother just went over, the Paul Miles case, the Richardson case, again, all inapplicable because they involve an actual decision. The certification at issue here is not a decision. And in my papers previously, I discussed another case, which is Richardson versus Zoning Board of Appeals of Framingham, in which they determined that an endorsement on a plan, which was a precondition to going before the planning board, was not a decision that was appealable. The certification at issue here is just that. It is a precondition to going forward with a Chapter 91 license. It is not a decision. There is no way to appeal the certification that's contained within the Chapter 91 license, as you will hear from the engineer, if you so elect to hear from him, but he does have a report which sets forth all these facts. The information contained in the Chapter 91 license was false. There's two cases that my brother just recently cited, and he cited it for the principle of equity. The first case is Deary, and he cited it generally. He didn't get into specific facts for good reason. Because the Deary case, as well as the Shirley case, are inapplicable to the facts before this court. And I'll tell you why briefly. In the Deary case, we have action by a town to compel an owner to remove a portion of a dwelling that was in violation of setback bylaw after the owner got approval from the selectmen to install the road. The individual in Deary followed the rules, did exactly what they were supposed to do, and the court found it inequitable to say, now you have to remove a portion of your dwelling, despite the fact that you complied with the rules, even though there may have been a mistake. You did what you were supposed to do. Completely different from what's happened here. There is no dispute that a special permit was needed to fill in Falmouth Harbor. We all know that. That's crystal clear. They also needed a building permit. You heard the building commissioner up here saying this project needed a building permit. The Shirley case is a unique case, and it's hard to follow, I will say. But what the Shirley case said is there are certain instances where equitable principles will allow you certain relief. And what they look at is essentially three principles. They say whether the decision creates a novel or unforeseen rule. Was this something that was unforeseen by the applicant at the time of, say, construction here? Clearly, it was not unforeseen that a special use permit and a building permit were required for this particular structure. Mr. Borselli has gotten special use permits for this precise type of project before. When my brother sat here and said, well, it was only 7 cubic yards, look to the bylaws. Do you notice anything relative to the cubic yard requirement as to whether or not that triggers the special use permit or the requirement that you obtain a special use permit? It's not in there. Whether it's 7 cubic yards, 90 cubic yards, 120 cubic yards, you need the special use permit, and it was clearly not unforeseen that that permit was required here. There, it was a weird situation where both parties were under an assumption that a setback was actually 20 feet. It got up to the Supreme Judicial Court, and they said, actually, it's 30. But since both parties were running under the assumption it was 20, it's going to be inequitable for us to go back and enforce the 30-foot bylaw. And actually, that ends the inquiry relative to the equitable nature of the relief under Shirley. But they go through 2 more prongs. They say, will the benefit of retroactive application will further the purpose of the new rule? There are no benefits. There's not going to be a benefit anywhere here. The benefit will be if you enforce the bylaws, because in turn what that will do is it will force people to comply with the bylaws. It won't tell people that they can go build whatever they want, not seek the requisite permits, and then come before you and say, I'm sorry, I didn't know the rules, so I get a free pass. That's what they're asking you to do here. I didn't know the rules. I built this structure. I took more land. I took a portion of Falmouth Inner Harbor that belonged to the public. I even took a portion of Mr. Jeffroy's land, but because I didn't know what I was doing, in equity, I already built it. Don't have to take it down. That's what they're asking you to do. And lastly, they say the hardship or inequity that will result from retroactive application of the new rule. Well, first of all, you don't get there. But secondarily, you don't get the benefit of the hardship if you didn't follow the rules in the first place. And again, we all know at a minimum, a special use permit was required to backfill into Falmouth Inner Harbor. So in summary, those are the new materials, and I'll stay away from addressing what I went over previously. In summary, if this board were to allow this appeal, what it would be doing is basically rewarding those who go out and do exactly what Campion did. Go out and build whatever they want without the requisite permits, and then come before you after a building commissioner issues an enforcement order and say, yeah, but it's already built, maybe I didn't know, but equity means that I can just keep it in place despite the fact that I took something that belonged to the public, I encroached onto another person's land, and I even misrepresented the facts to the building commissioner when I applied for my Chapter 91 license. We don't want to sanction that type of conduct, and for that reason, this appeal should be denied.
Just for the information to the board, when he's speaking of special permit, it's a special permit through the Board of Selectmen, not this board.
I'm Michael McGrath, a registered land surveyor and engineer. He brought up that I testified up in DEP that there were no stones in front of the particular bulkhead. It's absolutely true there were no stones. The reason is, if you look at the photographs that were submitted view on Mr. Pacelli's letter today. I have to get the whole thing up here. They're dredging. They are dredging. In order to drive this, they dredged Falmouth Inner Harbor. If you look at the license plan that was in draft submitted to Ladio Gore, it shows that mean low water hits the face of the bulkhead. If you look at my license plan that was done before, there were tidal flats in front of it. There was a stony bottom, and they dredged it and removed it. And it's not shown on the plan that was submitted to the building commissioner. And if you look at what the zoning bylaw says, it says you need a special permit to dredge, excavate, fill, etc. I've highlighted the section of the bylaw. So the bottom line is this is much more simple than going through the minutia. And all you have to do is focus. They dredged. To put the wall in, they dredged. If you look at the draft license that he submitted with his letter today, it shows stones going way out. There's no stones there today. I would like to submit a copy of a letter I wrote today that highlights it.
I didn't mean the minutia like you mean, Michael. My apologies.
Pardon?
The word minutia that I used.
The hearing's the first to go.
Yes, that's what you keep saying.
Thanks.
You want one?
Is that what you handed in, or is this?
No.
Oh, this is new as of today?
Mike, you don't like me? I'm a voting member.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you share? So, the bottom line is, if you look at the cross-section of my license plan that he talks about, and he looks at it, and then you look at his, you'll see that they dredged, and he dredged a substantial amount.
Mr. Boselli?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Michael Borselli from Falmouth Engineering, and I represented the applicant at the time of these proceedings. I submitted a letter to you that disputed much of the information that was asserted in the October 18th letter to you by Mr. McGrath, and I attached documents to the back in the form of plans, some of which we've been talking about right now, photographs, which are attached to the back in a very specific order for a very specific reason. And what I'd like to do is clarify a couple of things without going through the details of the letter. So I think the easiest way to do that is to first look at the first exhibit at the back of the letter, the license plan dated January 13th, 2011, as sheet 3 of 3. The cross-section.
Your letter.
At the back of my letter. So this is the plan I'm talking about that we've been looking at. The fact of the matter is that the letter from Mr. McGrath incorrectly suggested that this plan that, at the time that Mr. Gore reviewed it, did not show what we're calling existing stone riprap on the cross-section. And I've also called it apron stone in my letter. It is, in fact, placed man-made stone at the base of the old stone wall that was used for the purposes of buttressing the base of the wall. It's important to note that this plan, which is different than the final plan that was issued, Chapter 91 license, shows the apron stone, and it is very close to, in fact, it's within days prior to receipt of the zoning certificate signature from Mr. Gore. That is not dredging. That is removal of an existing structure in the form of riprap. There's a distinction between that. That riprap stone is part of the existing stone wall system that was in place at the time that we made the repair and proposed the repair. The repair was to use a new technology, or a newer technology than stone, also known as vinyl sheeting, which was in fact shoring up the wall. Repairing it by shoring up the stone wall so that it would not collapse, but it could still remain in place so that, as an alternative to repair, the removal of that stone wall would have caused potentially more environmental damage. So it was common and routine to propose projects where you would install shoring to repair a wall directly against and adjacent to the wall. And in this case, if you look at this riprap at the base, the sheeting was actually installed within the footprint of the structure, which had different components. If you then flip to the first photo, which I think was up on the screen, it shows that stone, that riprap stone, which is integral to the stone wall being removed for the very specific purpose to allow the shoring that was repairing the wall to be driven snugly up against it. So a portion of the existing structure was removed to facilitate the repair. It was not dredging. If you look further into the photos, to the third photo, you will see a much longer view of that situation with the existing stone wall, with the riprap at the base that was removed, that you saw in the previous photo, to make way for the sheeting. And if you compare this photo to the final photo in the package, you will see that you can still see in the photo, to the right of the shoring or sheeting that was repairing and supporting the old stone wall, the existing stone wall directly behind it. Every effort was made in the field to install a sheet shoring material directly in front of and adjacent to the stone wall within the footprint of the apron base stones, which were also part of the structure. So there was no proposal to dredge. And I think that sums it up.
Thank you, Mr. Briselli. Does the board have any questions?
No questions.
I'm not a voting member.
No questions.
No
I'd like to get
questions?
into discussion.
Okay, I think that's appropriate. Would anyone like to start us off?
Paul, you said you were...
No, I
Yes.
don't have anything to discuss. I'm good.
Well, do you want to, could you share?
Want to play with us?
Why you're leaning one way? Might be helpful.
Well, yeah, I think that the board probably has a greater understanding of this than the building official. And so just based on the fact that this is a 7-year-old issue, that we're splitting hairs as to what constitutes taking Falmouth. You have two engineers battling each other over what this means or that means or whatever. This was properly permitted through DEP. 7 years old. When it went before the building official previously, Mr. Gore, he made a determination. He made a determination. Now, 7 years later, it's before this board to have this thing removed. I'm just saying, I think I have a great understanding now of what took place, and I would vote to overturn the building inspector's decision.
Do you need so you're a building commissioner, do you know if you would need a building permit in this circumstance? Is that?
I can't speak for Falmouth, but I've never issued a building permit for a retaining wall. Something waterways, Chapter 91 stuff. We don't go near it. But we do sign those documents that asks us if we see any zoning violations all the time. Engineers bring them to me all the time. Yeah, but I've never issued a building permit for any of that stuff. Docks, piers, floats. I think we're specifically prohibited from doing it. Bridges, we don't do it. I don't do it. I've never done it, 20 years.
Okay.
But I can't speak for Falmouth. I'm just saying,
Right.
I don't. Yeah, I mean, so, you know, it's just how I feel, and, you know, we've been given a lot of information, and I'm now able to see the clear picture and make a proper decision on it.
Anyone else like to weigh in?
I will weigh in. So I think both attorneys did a really excellent job, and I think it's a really interesting issue. I know you guys are battling it out, but I kind of wish I was on that side because it's interesting. It's one of the more interesting cases that we've had before us, and I also think it presents some questions that there may not be perfect answers to. This lack of decision, you know, what would the person have appealed? But, you know, there was this certification back in 2011. If a building permit's not issued, but you see the building permit, but if the building permit doesn't have to be issued, right? And you see it being built, is it subject to a 10-year statute of limitations if there's no building permit? I don't know, because there were a couple of points that I did want to address. So Joffrey's counsel just said, you know, it's disingenuous to say that they were, that was my note. I said it was disingenuous to say that they were trying to skirt the rules because we know that they applied for relief that they thought that they needed. They got a certification. So I don't think that they were trying to do something hidden or trying to build this illegal structure. The other point that I want to address, I completely understand the town's not stopped. The building commissioner can enforce the bylaw, but since now it's been appealed to us, we stand in the shoes, we have the ability to grant relief. And I do think, based on principles of equity, certainly, it's been there for 7 years, there's some evidence before us, or at least some testimony that Joffrey has used this in the past. So I think that it would be appropriate to overturn the building commissioner's decision.
You awake, Jerry?
No, I'm awake. I'm trying to absorb this. I mean, we got two people going one way now, right?
I think it appears that Mr. Gore followed the correct steps. You do have the certification. I think you have to rely on that. I think Mr. Borzelli's letter also carries a lot of weight on the situation that happened with the wall. So I would also go to reverse the current building commissioner's determination.
And I tend to agree with the board members who have chimed in so far, not to add to the conversation too many points, but Kim, you wrapped it up eloquently, I'll say that. Jerry, do you care to
No,
chime
I
in before we?
think we know what the vote's gonna be, so. Why extend the discussion?
Well, do you have any
Well, for your
thoughts
opinion.
about what,
Well, no, I respect the other board members. I was leaning the other way, but I guess if,
not disrespectful to disagree, Jerry.
well, some people accuse me of that.
I disagree with everyone usually all the time, so.
No, I think maybe, it's gonna be battled out in other courts, so.
I'm sure that's the case, anyways. So I think we have enough information. Everybody feels that they can make a decision. So I will move that we close application 6118. And following that, I will move that we, grant, sorry.
You want to close the hearing first?
We'll-
and
Oh,
then a
we'll
sorry, yes,
close.
we should vote that, yes.
Motion to
A
close
second.
the hearing by Kim, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Bob, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And then I will move that we, grant the appeal and we overturn the building commissioner's determination.
Second.
And I think the findings would be kind of our discussion, certainly. I don't know.
No, I agree. I think someone else is writing up the discussion.
So that motion was made by Kim and second by Bob?
But do you want to go over,
Yeah, I think
that
we should do
discussion
some
is that
highlights.
the board feels it was properly permitted in 2011? Is that what you're saying?
I think there was a certification made by Eladio Gore in 2007. That certification.
2011.
2011, excuse me. That certification was relied upon by Mass DEP. that maybe the board's unsure of whether a building permit is necessary. I don't know. I think it may not be necessary in this circumstance.
I mean,
That
sorry.
7 years have passed, that there was some testimony that the party seeking enforcement has been aware of this structure
right.
throughout that period, was aware that there was a notice of intent filed, received notice of that, has used the structure in the past, and has never before sought enforcement. While we understand that the town's not barred by latches, so that the building inspector or building commissioner would not have been barred, we, on appeal, stand in his shoes, and we can determine that enforcement is inappropriate due to the party requesting inequitable conduct.
What was that last one?
Well,
Enforcement?
the equities, basically.
Enforcement is what?
Perhaps inequitable.
Inequitable.
Rock solid.
Okay.
Okay, so that motion was made by Kim and seconded by Bob, I think?
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, thank you.
Okay, minutes.
Minutes, open meeting items. We have the minutes from October 18th, 2018. Has everyone had a chance to review them?
Yes.
I didn't even, just disappeared.
Any,
Still here.
any modifications by anyone?
No.
No.
Entertain a motion to approve.
I will move that we approve the minutes from October 18th.
Second it.
Made by Kim,
Were you here, Kim?
Yeah.
October 18th?
Wasn't it? Who seconded?
I mean,
I was here, was
you
I
came back late, so I'm eating you up.
Remember? I'm lost.
I thought I was.
you were here.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, that was made by Kim and second by Ed. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Even I didn't remember.
You on the minutes?
On the
Okay.
minutes.
Board updates. This is my last hearing, as everyone knows, and it's so sad, but such is life. I have to do it.
Where's the procedures?
Oh.
So I didn't bring the procedures. I did look for, I know that I have them at home, so I will be doing, I am technically a member until November 9th. That's my last day. So I will do the work that I promised everyone that I would do, and I will submit it to Suri
Take them.
so that you guys can vote on that and make whatever changes without me even knowing about them. But it's been really fun and really informative. And I've loved it, so
Well, don't be a stranger, you can still
Sam,
show
no.
up once in a while.
I will, and I'll give you guys a hard time, and I'll complain about sheds.
We're gonna miss your thoughtful analysis.
Thank you.
Do you want to close?
For sure.
Procedural rules and policies.
Yeah, so
you-
that was
you
my
covered that. Future agenda items, I'm going to take this time, just as the chairman of the board, I'll abuse my discretion a little bit.
Okay.
I'll just point out that this is Kim's last meeting, as she did state. She's been on the board since 2014, first as an associate member, then as a full-time member, and she hit the trifecta. She was the clerk, vice chairman, and then the chairman of the board.
I think in opposite order.
It was mixed up a little bit there.
It was.
So, coming from me personally, and of course, I'm sure from, on behalf of the board, thank you for all your time.
Thank you.
Yes, definitely.
You've been fantastic all these
Thank
years.
you.
And I hope you make partners soon.
Thank you, me too.
Yeah. And we
That's
all,
the mission.
we also have another departure tonight, and that would be Suri. This is her last meeting.
Oh my God.
She's a fixture at Town Hall. She's been here since 2004, was it, Suri?
Been hanging on the wall for a while, yeah.
You've been hanging in for since 2004, and I don't think the board can express how grateful we are to have had you, and members of the public and the applicants as well. You will be missed dearly every Thursday night.
Thank you. I will miss
For sure.
my job. I really enjoy working with the public, with the attorneys, the engineers. I really, really enjoy my job. And I thank you. Can we close now?
Thank you.
And we can go celebrate you two now, so
Yay.
there.
But first,
Ta-da.
Meeting's adjourned, right?